Hi everyone and welcome to IDG Live. This is an open Q&A about A Song of Ice and Fire, and we will get into that in just one moment. But first of all, I thought as this is the first new channel, I'd just give you a little flavour of what's going on and why. I know a few people who asked why have I split the channels up into two. Basically what's happening, the main channel in Deep Geek is going to carry on doing the main videos, the normal videos about Lord of the Rings, about A Song of Ice and Fire, The Witcher, and more. That's just going to carry on as normal. This channel is where all of the live streams are going to be from now on. We're also going to have a few other extra things going on. I'm going to start doing YouTube Shorts. I've done a couple of them. You can find them elsewhere on this channel. Also, I'm going to be doing a few interviews, and there are some other exciting things I've got planned for this channel too. What I found was that some people enjoy both the live streams and the normal videos. Some, however, prefer one or the other. I thought I'd separate out the two just so it's easier for people, and also because I wanted to try out a few things on this channel. So the live streams will stay exactly the same. The only difference is they are moving over from the main channel to IDG Live, but expect a few other things that I haven't previously done happening on this channel. So that's all to look forward to. If you are just stumbling across this, now is a great time to click on the subscribe button, the little bell icon. If you want to be getting notifications for the live streams, that's the best way to do it. Okay, let's go straight into questions, though. I had a super chat, I think, just before I came on air, actually, from Chris saying, hi, Chris, saying, is it coincidence that the dragons have reappeared at the same time, all linked? Well, this is question. And within a few short years of that, the others start to move because they've been around for a while. Let's not forget. By the time have been moving for a little while. The reappearance of the dragons, Danny's three dragons, is not a coincidence. It is a magical event. All the things George R. R. Martin has said the same thing in lots of different ways. Basically, this was a one-off. This was all the stars aligning, everything working perfectly. She did the right things. The sacrifices were there. The fire was there. The blood was there. The red comet was in the sky. Everything worked out exactly right for that to happen. So, is there a link there between the two? Perhaps through the comet being the herald, yes, of the dragons, but also perhaps this is the herald of the long night, the winter as well. The two are inextricably linked in my view. Now, at the moment, those links are thematic. George R. R. Martin has not yet spelled out, and may never spell out, the exact building blocks for how this works in real life. But yes, they are linked. No, it's not a coincidence, but we may or may not be told eventually. Jibbadol, hi there, saying, will Barristan survive the battle at Meereen? And if so, how will he react to hearing about Fagon? Will he switch sides on Dany? So this is trying to get to the heart, I think, of Sir Barristan's character. He has come. He left. If we pick him up at the very beginning of the story, he left. Basically, the employee, the Kingsguard of Joffrey, he was dismissed, and he was angry, and he clearly went off to try and find who would be the true king. And he eventually gets sent over, finds Dany, and reveals himself, and he is now very much, I'd say, chief of staff, but he's ruling in her absence. He is basically ruling Meereen. Now, we've got 2 pre-released chapters from the Winds of Winter, not the full text, certainly for the second bit, but George R. R. Martin has read it out at a convention many years ago, of Sir Barristan involved in the Battle of Meereen. Because where we leave the story, Meereen is besieged, and he basically, as we see him in those pre-release chapters from Winds of Winter, he leads a charge out to try and take out the catapults, which are causing huge amounts of damage. Will he survive that? Probably. There is now no immediate reason for his POV chapters, however. The way George R. R. Martin, if you've never sort of unpicked this, the way George R. R. Martin introduces new POV characters is when he needs to tell a bit of the story, but he doesn't have a POV character there already. And so when Dany was leaving, he had then had Sir Barristan in so that we could see what was happening in Meereen. The same thing is happening, incidentally, up at the Wall. We get POV characters are leaving the Wall. Sam has left the Wall. John obviously is being killed. Who is left there? Melisandre. Melisandre has just been introduced as a POV character at the Wall so that we can see what's happening at the Wall. However, other POV characters are now arriving down in Meereen, particularly Tyrion, and we will start to see a lot of this now from Tyrion's perspective. So the need for him as a POV character is now going to be a lot more reduced. But I think the thing that you ask about is, in particular, what he will do when he hears about Fagon is really intriguing, because he will find out. Tyrion, he'll ask Tyrion, what's his story? Why is he there? Tyrion suddenly appears on the far side of the world. How on earth did you get here? And Tyrion will reveal his story, and he will tell him about Fagon. Fagon, let's not forget, we call him Fagon, fake Aegon, but he is claiming to be Aegon VI, the missing Targaryen, the Targaryen child who was killed by the Lannisters way back in Robert's Rebellion. Now, depending on which way you look at the family tree, I'm not going to get into all of the details of it now, but you could say he is the heir, ahead of Dany, if he is who he claims to be. So would Sir Barristan, who is many things, but he has his own sense of nobility and justice and rightness, if he becomes convinced that Fagon is the rightful heir and would make a good king, and if he starts to get concerned either that Dany isn't returning, or that when she does return she's a lot like the Mad King, yeah, he could. He absolutely could. I think that there's at the moment I put it a 50-50 chance, but it really does depend. If he makes it all the way across to Westeros, I think there's a fair chance he might turn sides. But let's not forget that that is probably not going to be until A Dream of Spring. Most of the Winds of Winter, from the Team Dany's perspective, is getting out of Meereen and then getting all the way across to probably Dragonstone, to Westeros. That is probably where we're going to end their story in this book. So if Sir Barristan is going to change sides, it's not necessarily in the next book. Let's go to a question from Diego Godoy saying, "Hola, Robert. Hola. I was recently rereading Arya's final chapter in A Clash of Kings, where she is serving Roose Bolton in Harrenhal. What do you think is the meaning of Roose Bolton burning that book? Had he made the decision to betray the Starks at that point? I think the answer is yes. So this is actually one of my favorite chapters in the entirety of A Song of Ice and Fire that you're talking about here. This is the last Arya chapter in A Clash of Kings. It's something like 4 or 5 chapters from the end. The bit that we generally remember this for is when she escapes Harrenhal. This is when she and Gendry and Hot Pie make it out, and she's heading off out of Harrenhal onto the next stage of her journey, which will be the Brotherhood Without Banners, and then the Hound, and so on. But the bit that is going on in the background is absolutely fascinating, because what's happened just before this chapter is that the Lannisters have left Harrenhal, and the Northern Army, led by Roose Bolton, has taken over. Now, this is not just the Boltons, but the main 2 parts of this are the Boltons and the Freys, which obviously will be very important later, because the Boltons and the Freys gain a bit of an alliance. This is going to lead up to the Red Wedding. Now, lots of things happen in this chapter, and it's one of those chapters where you can read it about 3 times. The first time and get different bits of information each time, because the first time you can see what Arya's understanding, and you can get through from what Arya is understanding about what's going on. Then you can go through and get an understanding of what's going on from our understanding where we're at in the book at the time. And then, having read all the way through, you can look back and see that there's huge amounts of foreshadowing, and not just foreshadowing. This is the tipping point when it comes to House Bolton. What do I mean by that? Well, we get a lot of different things going on. First of all, we get Arya, who is cupbearer. She's a servant there, cupbearer to Roose Bolton. She is there, and she listens to basically a council meeting. Roose Bolton has all of his advisors there, and they're updating him on the state of the war, what's going on. And they say Robb is obviously heading off into the Westerlands, and they're winning victories, but big news, Winterfell has fallen. Bran and Rickon are dead. And this is a great blow to Arya, obviously, but she has to hide it. But Winterfell has fallen. Bran and Rickon are dead. The Ironborn are starting to take some of the important castles in the north. What are you going to do, Roose Bolton? He's a long way south with his army. Robb is way off into the Westlands. The north is collapsing down around everyone's ears. What are you going to do? Some people start saying that the Starks have lost. You should just abandon the Starks at this point. But he refuses to commit to that. So that's the situation. And then the rest of the chapter is him going through this kind of mental process of figuring out what he's doing and making a decision. So after that, he then gets a letter from his wife. He's got a new wife up in the north, and she's sending him these letters. And we hear from Arya that these letters are exactly the same each time, as far as she can tell. The hint, though, is that there's some sort of coded messaging going on between them. And he receives the letter, he burns it, he sends a letter back. What we know happens a little bit later is that the Boltons then betray Theon. They take Winterfell and burn Winterfell. That's what happens next in the north. Is that triggered by what Roose Bolton says? The hints are perhaps that's the case. So that's going on behind the scenes. Then he says, okay, let's send off these, some of my forces. Let's send them off to the east. Let's send them off to take out Rosby, and I think it was Maidenpool, and they should burn down the castles, and they should put everyone there to the sword and say that this is justice from King Robb Stark. The people he sends off, very noticeably, people like the Glovers, these are Stark loyalists, leaving him with his own people in Harrenhal and making sure that the people of Rosby and Maidenpool, they get the message loud and clear: Robb Stark's not a good guy. So that then happens, and then he suddenly announces, you know what, I'm going to go and hunt some wolves. I'm getting tired of all these wolf howls in the night. I'm going to go and hunt some wolves. And he goes off on a wolf hunt, and sure enough, he gets some wolves. He kills some wolves, and very foreshadowy, of course. So by this point, all of our spidey senses should be tingling, is that there's something not going right here. At which point, Arya runs into Elmer Frey, who's a random Frey who happens to be in Harrenhal, who she has met before in Harrenhal. She knows he's a Frey. He doesn't know who she is. And he has basically said, my father has told me I'm going to be married to a princess. Now, what we know, what Arya doesn't know, but what we know is that princess is Arya. This was part of the deal. This was part of the deal that was struck when, if you remember, when Catelyn Stark struck that deal with Walder Frey. One part of the deal was that Robb would marry a Frey. Another part was that Arya would marry a Frey. We often overlook that bit, but Arya was supposed to be marrying a Frey as well. Now, he then, when Arya stumbles across him at this point in the chapter, he then is really angry and distraught. He says, word has just arrived. A raven has come. We have been betrayed, and I am not going to be marrying my princess anymore. Arya's not got the foggiest idea who's betrayed the Freys, what's going on, why this matters, that he's not marrying his princess. But this is news that Robb Stark has married somebody that he shouldn't have, Jane Westerling. This is news that the promise that had been made for him to be marrying the Freys has been broken. And that means that also Arya's not then going to be married off. So Arya doesn't know that. We don't know all the details of it yet, but that is clearly going on. Then Arya goes back to Roose Bolton, and she comes into Roose Bolton's room. He's there, sitting in a leather armchair in front of a roaring fire, leafing through an ancient book. He flicks through a few pages, and then he very carefully places it in the fire, and it burns. And then he says to Arya, I'm leaving back to head back up towards the north now. I shan't be needing you anymore. All of this is foreshadowy. That book, which is what this question was originally about, quite a long roundabout way of saying it, that book is symbolic. That is him having made his decision. The Starks, this ancient alliance, fealty that the Boltons had towards House Stark, that he is now abandoning. He's been hunting the wolves, and now he gets this ancient book and he burns it. If we want a little extra level of sort of foreshadowing on this, literally 2 chapters later, that's when Winterfell itself burns. Ramsay Bolton says, burn Winterfell. So this book symbolically is Roose Bolton making up his mind to abandon the Starks by putting it into the fire, and symbolically is also Winterfell being burned. It's a brilliant chapter that you can read, as I say, on at least 3 different levels. Callie Summers saying, hi there, Callie, saying Dany was probably headed east around the world via Ashai before the time change. We can still see Ashai in Melisandre's POVs, but what are the places you would have hoped to see? Yeah, so for those who don't know all of the background of this, originally George R. R. Martin had factored in a 5-year time jump, sort of about where we are in the books. The idea was that it would allow all of the characters to age up, the dragons to get a lot bigger, and you can see where a lot of the main characters could just be for a period of time. Arya could just be training in Bravos. Bran could be training up in Bloodraven's cave north of the wall. Dany was going to go east to Asshai, and we can still see some remnants of the foreshadowing that in the early books. She was going to go east to Asshai. George R. R. Martin has confirmed we are now not going to go to Asshai in the books, but we could see it, as you say, Melisandre's POV. We may see her remembering Asshai or something like that. Yes, what I would have loved to see along with that is the journey. Probably they'd have just gotten boat from Karth and headed east. But if they could have stopped off at Yi Ti or Leng or something like that along the way, I think that I would have absolutely loved that. The Five Forts, I think, is a bit... That's at the northeast of Yi Ti, so that's a long, long way away from Asshai, and it seems likely that she wouldn't have gone there. There's no particular reason to be heading all the way that far north. Question from JD Finity. Do you think it's possible Rhaenys survived in Dawn but was mortally wounded, and that the letter received from them could have actually been written by Rhaenys? Could it be a deathbed change of heart asking for peace? So this is going way back in time to just after the invasion. Dawn had been resisting invasion. The Targaryens had been keeping on going at it, and then finally Rhaenys gets shot down over the Hellholt, and her dragon dies, and she disappears, presumed dead. Her brother and sister understandably get very angry about this and try and burn down all of Dawn. And eventually the Dornish, there's a change in power. The Dornish princess who'd been there before died. And then we get Prince Nymor, who sends a letter. He sends a letter with his daughter, and the head of the dragon. And that goes up to King's Landing. And as we read in Fire and Blood, Aegon receives the letter. He reads it. He grips the Iron Throne so tightly that his hand bleeds. He walks out, immediately gets on top of his dragon Balerion, flies to Dragonstone, is there overnight, flies back, and then declares peace. Now, what fits the facts? For what we're not told what was in that letter. What fits the facts? Could it be that she wrote a letter, a deathbed letter, begging for peace? It's possible. I mean, I think there's a fair chance that she did survive, but if she had written a letter begging for it, would he have necessarily believed that this was written with fair conscience, not under duress or anything like that? I think that's quite a hard thing to sort of try and justify myself. What seems very clear is that this was a peace offering. Whatever was going on, this is a peace offering from Prince Nymor. He sends his daughter. He didn't have to do that. He sends the dragon head back. He knows this is important to the Targaryens, and frankly, that was a massive dragon's head. Dragon's head. It would have taken a lot of effort. So this was an olive branch. This was a desperate attempt at peace from the Dornish. My best guess is that this was something along the lines of we're sending Rhaenys' body back to Dragonstone. You can do what you wish with your burial practices, burn the body, whatever. And then after that, let's have peace. This has just been going on for too long. Otherwise, we will have to just carry on, and you're not going to defeat us. I think it's going to be something along those lines, because it turns out that Aegon seems to have got on okay with Nomor after this. They have a visit, and we don't hear of any bad blood. In fact, they seem to get on okay, which seems to imply this wasn't a threat in the letter. I don't think we've got full enough evidence to know exactly what was there, but it was something along those lines. Maybe, as you say, it could have been something from Rhaenys. My guess is it was just a returning of her body. Mara Lee, hi there, Mara, saying just a show of love and support for all the fabulous content and stories on your 3 channels. Yes, I have 3 channels now, as well as the great merch in the store. Love and appreciate you with all my heart. Hugs to Dan, your handsome dog. Clueless Fangirl, I have added you as a moderator, as you keep on mentioning it in the chat. Hi there, Helen. Question from, I think I had another question. Richard Smith saying, I've been rewatching the Robert's Rebellion series. Seems to have more views than I last recall. It may well do. I can't remember. It's been a while since I checked that. But what are Varys's motivations during the rebellion, and what are his timelines for joining the Fagon plot? Well, good question. So Varys arrived in King's Landing. He was hired by Aerys, basically to be his Master of Whisperers, and he seems to have been doing that up until the point of Robert's Rebellion. He will have known everything that was going on. He will have witnessed what the Mad King, what Aerys was like, and he, from what we later know, he cares about the small folk, or he claims to care about the small folk. His plan with Fagon later on seems to be not just about getting my guy on the throne. It seems to be genuinely trying to get a good ruler on the throne. That seems to be what his intention is. And one can only assume that that has come from seeing what Aerys and then Robert Baratheon were like on the throne. Now, what were his motivations, therefore, in Robert's Rebellion? All through it, he seems to have kept the support of Aerys. So all the way through it, he managed to at least persuade Aerys that he was on his side. There is, however, one moment when there is somebody who betrayed Aerys. It's somebody in King's Landing who betrayed him. Now, this moment comes from quite early on in the war. We have Aerys has just said, okay, I want the heads of Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. And Jon Arryn says, nope. And Ned and Robert head off. Ned heads north, makes his way back up to Winterfell, gathers the armies, and comes back down south. That takes a long time. Robert makes his way across back home to Storm's End to gather his armies. He's actually, if you look at a map of Westeros, if you just imagine it, he's actually in a really bad situation strategically, because the rebellion is based towards the north. The north and the Vale of Arryn are part of the rebellion, as is some of the Riverlands. So that's where they are. He is going down to the Stormlands, which is south of Westeros, and then his plan is to bring his forces in this sort of big circle up and around to meet up with the forces coming from the north. So first of all, he has to break a siege break into Gulltown. He then gets a boat across the Storm's End, gathers his forces, at which point he gets told he's got some enemies within his own camp. Some of his bannermen are meeting up to form an army against him. They're meeting up, ironically or not, at Summerhall. And he then charges off. Having heard this, he charges off and manages to meet each of those armies individually before they can join up. We don't know what would have happened if they'd managed to form up and create a decent defensive position, but generally speaking, tactically, taking on smaller armies one at a time is a lot better. So that's what he did, and he managed to achieve that with help from an informant in King's Landing. So my instinct is that Varys probably, we're not told this, but my guess is that Varys probably turned from supporting Aerys at some point, but realized that he should stay in power. And he realized that he wanted to stay in a position of power within King's Landing. So he made sure that he fed the information to Robert Baratheon. This is kind of backed up by the fact that he was kept in the small council when Robert Baratheon took over as king. Would you really want somebody who was outwardly loyal, had been hired by the previous king, outwardly very loyal to the previous king, and knew all of the secrets? Would you really want that person still around? There must be some sort of a reason for it. So that's that. The hint is that his mind turned around the time of the rebellion. I think I've got another couple of questions in the chat. Yeah, so question from Ranabe Mitra. Love to you and the mods. Why do you think George R. R. Martin made Dany see the old rulers of the great empire of the Dawn, the House of the Undying, ancient ancestors? So if you're talking about in the House of the Undying, there is some kind of symbolism early on in the books that does sort of hint towards Dany looking east and going east, which is probably what's going on there. The visions she receives in the House of the Undying are, however, not about going east. They're all about going west. So why is he talking about ancient ancestors? I don't think that's a hint. I don't think there's a particular link across there. Maybe if there is, maybe I've missed it. I don't know. But the Targaryens or the Valyrians possibly did or probably did come from further east than the Valyrian Peninsula itself. There's greater minds than mine have way back in the time drawn various links and seen where perhaps we had the even more ancient empire before the Valyrian Empire, based off in the far east, Yi Ti, and all the way down to Ashai. That, for me, I think is great and cool background. I don't think that's going to play an important part in the actual story. Cloaked One, I've just added you as a moderator as well. I'm just playing catch up on the moderators because they didn't carry over from the last channel. Clueless Fangirl saying, I solemnly swear to abuse my powers like before. Well, you will be unmodded if you do so. Callie Summers saying, may the 4th be with you all, mods and Robert, and may the 4th be with you too. Richard Smith, will Lady Stoneheart ever get any closure re Jon Snow and Ned's supposed infidelity? My guess is probably no. I think that what is left of Catelyn Stark is actually not so much about Jon Snow. This is about the wrongs that have been done to her family. Because let's not forget, she thinks rightly that Robb has been murdered, that Bran and Rickon have been murdered. Not rightly, she thinks that. And Sansa and Arya are missing. So that's what she needs to get closure for. The stuff about Jon and Ned's supposed infidelity, that I think is now sufficiently in the past. The things that seem to linger when it comes to people coming back from the dead in this world, the things that seem to linger seem to be the things that are most important in the present. We see that with Beric Dondarrion, for example. When he comes back, he remembers the things that he's doing in the present, but the stuff from his past starts to fade. He can't remember the name of the woman that he was due to marry. He can't remember what his love looked like. That kind of thing. Let's go to a question from Keen Jayaf. Apologies if I mispronounced that name. Saying, "Hi, Robert. How is it justified to dismiss Ned with little to no discussion as the Knight of the Laughing Tree, considering his direct textual links? If not clues to Ned being the Knight of the Laughing Tree, what was the purpose of showing that Ned trained specifically to achieve a booming voice and subsequently taught Jon and Robb the same? Or what is the significance of only the Knight of the Laughing Tree and Ned being described as no friend of the king? Given that Lyanna has no similar connections to the Knight of the Laughing Tree, for example, is not described as a good horse rider despite the fandom's reliance on this quote about Lyanna. Shouldn't Ned's connections warrant an in-depth discussion or investigation into him being the Knight of the Laughing Tree?" Andrew Roberts similarly asked, do you think there are any other viable possibilities besides Lyanna Stark for who is the Knight of the Laughing Tree? Okay, so to bring everybody into the same place on this, the Knight of the Laughing Tree is a story that we're told primarily through Jojen and Mira, who tell it to Bran, and they are surprised that Bran has not heard this story before. This is what happened at the tourney at Harrenhal and is at the heart of all of the mysteries that we have that lead up to Robert's rebellion. So the story we get is Howland Reed, the lad he's called in the story, but this is clearly Howland Reed, arrives at the tourney at Harrenhal. He'd just come from the Isle of Faces, and he gets set upon by 3 squires. And basically they see that he's from House Reed. They call him a mudman, a frog eater, and all of the bad things there. And they're picking on him, and they're kicking him and beating him up. And then in comes Lyanna. Lyanna comes, we're told, roaring, and takes them on. One of her 3 of them beats them all up, and they have to go chasing off. At which point Lyanna then looks after Howland, and she says he wasn't going to attend the great feast at the tourney, and she says, "No, of course you've got to be there. You're a lord of a great house. You've got to come and be there at the feast." And she's saying, "How are you going to get your revenge on those guys?" And he's like, "Oh, actually, no, I'm not very good at the fighting thing." He's angry, he wants revenge, he prays for revenge, but he doesn't think that he's the person to do it. Benjen says, "Hey, I can get you some armor if you want." But it's no. But he points out, he says, "Those 3 there. That's who it is." Cut to the tourney itself. A mystery knight appears who has as a sigil a laughing tree, a weirwood tree. And this knight then challenges the 3 knights that the 3 squires belonged to, defeats each of them, and should have received a sort of a payment, basically their armor, their horse, things like that, but instead says, actually, what you need to do is go and apologize. Go and apologize to Howland Reed. Those 3 knights are defeated by the Knight of the Laughing Tree. The Knight of the Laughing Tree then disappears, never to be seen from again. The Mad King Aerys is there and says, "This is all very suspicious. This is no friend of mine. So go and find this person." Sends off Rhaegar. Other people go and try and find, but nobody's found. That's the story. That's the Knight of the Laughing Tree. So, who is this mystery knight? Who could it be? Well, the context of the story very clearly shows that whoever this Knight of the Laughing Tree is, they are somebody who cares deeply about the honor of House Reed. I think we can probably, some people have suggested it was Howland. I'm going to say probably not. Maybe his prayers were answered by making him a great fighter, but it's clearly that he wasn't a great fighter. That doesn't seem to fit with this. This was somebody on his behalf saying people should apologize to him. So who is it? The most obvious and only real candidates, based on the information we have, are the Starks. There are three, well, there's 4 Starks there. It's not Brandon. He would have, if he was going to do such a thing, he would have done it himself. We wouldn't have been a mystery knight. It's completely not his character, which leaves the 3 options. We get Lyanna, we get Benjen, and we get Ned. Now, similarly, I think we can probably discount Benjen. Benjen was quite young at the time. He wasn't noted as a particular fighter or anything like that. Almost certainly not him. So the 2 candidates that we possibly could have here are Ned or Lyanna. Now, you've put up there a couple of reasons why, literary kind of reasons why, textual clues as to why this might be Ned. The first is that the Knight of the Laughing Tree is said to have had a booming voice, and we're told that Ned had been taught by Jon Arryn, Ned and Robert Baratheon had been taught by Jon Arryn that you had to have a loud voice to be commanding people in combat. And later we hear that his sons had learned this on from him. Does this mean it was Ned? I don't see that as strong textual evidence because there are lots of people who are said to have booming voices. This isn't like it's only this 2 characters who are said to have a booming voice, Ned and the Knight of the Laughing Tree. If that were the case, I would take that as reasonably strong textual evidence, but there are lots of people who are said to have booming voices. And Lyanna is, we're told, roared. That's one of the few things we're told about what she was like and what she did. She roared. So she was clearly capable of having a loud voice. And also, the Knight of the Laughing Tree would have to be disguising their voice as well. So that I don't personally see as strong evidence. The second thing you say is this Ned being described as no friend of the king. So this is a reference much later to Stannis, who's talking to, I think, Catelyn, and he says, Ned was no friend of mine. However, he was a good and honorable man, or words to that effect. Now, does that link across to what we're told for the story of the Knight of the Laughing Tree? Well, it's probably worth pointing out that if we're going for textual links, that the actual phrase of no friend of the king doesn't appear anywhere in A Song of Ice and Fire. So it's not the exact phrase, is not repeated anywhere. We're just looking at no friend of the king said this, that the Knight of the Laughing Tree was no friend of his. So if we were to see a textual link across to say Ned, is Ned the only person who is no friend of a king? No. Or no friend of somebody? No. In fact, Stannis also says a king has no friends. So he's clearly saying that's everyone. It's not just Ned. No one is a friend of mine. And there are various other characters who use that same turn of phrase in thinking or saying. Sansa thinks about Littlefinger when she's later on in her journey and she's starting to actually work through a few things. She goes, Littlefinger is no friend of mine. Asher, when she gets a letter from Barroton, I think it is, tries to work out who this might be from, and she said, I can't remember who's at Barroton. Whoever the Lord is there, he is no friend of mine. So the phrase is used a lot. I think Tyrion uses it as well. The phrase is used a lot. So I don't think that there's a direct correlation there. The evidence, I think, for Lyanna is pretty strong. Clearly, she's the one who takes the lead in trying to defend Howland Reed's honor. She jumps in and takes on the squires. Then she's the one who's saying, come to the feast. Then she's the one who's saying, how are you going to get your revenge? She's the one driving this. So it would be entirely within her, what we know of her character, for her to be doing this. Ned, we don't hear him do any of those things. Secondly, she clearly is good at fighting. She just took on 3 squires on her own, 1 against 3, so she's very good. And there are a few references. I think Roose Bolton said that she was, to her being good at horse riding, Roose Bolton, I think, said she was half centaur or something like that, that she was, it's almost like she was a horse. She was so good at horse riding. So she's certainly capable of doing it. And it does tie in well, in my view, to the Rhaegar and Lyanna meeting story. There has to be a reason why they met, how they met at Harrenhal. And we've been given just the one thing, really, that he did. He participated in, well, first of all, he went there and was sort of going to do a whole load of plotting, but then his dad turned up. Then he got told to find the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Then he won the tourney and gave the flowers to Lyanna. This works perfectly with this idea that he then goes hunting for the Knight of the Laughing Tree, finds the Knight of the Laughing Tree. It's Lyanna. He falls in love with her. That and hence giving her the laurels, the flowers at the end of it all. That all adds in. So, in summary to all of that, can we dismiss Ned? No, I don't think we can. We simply do not have enough evidence yet about exactly what happened. George R. Martin said about the tourney at Harrenhal, he could write an entire book, a George R. Martin length book, about what happened at Harrenhal. So many things happened, and we've just been told 2 or 3 pages worth. So lots of extra things could have happened. But so we can't discount people. But on the evidence that we have, the person with the strongest motivation, the person who seems most likely able to do it, and the person who it fits into the wider narrative for it to be, to my mind, is Lyanna. And so until we get more information, that's what I'm going with. Master Lumen saying, hello, Robert. How do you feel about the colourful, brave companions, specifically the gracious Lord Goat? The brave companions are Sellsword Company, who are they're not nice at all. They're not nice. Let's just put it simply like that. They fall in with Roose Bolton. They get left in charge of Harrenhal. Then they just sort of start going wild over the Riverlands. They're not good. Do they have a role? Yes, it's just causing chaos in the Riverlands as a story arc. They are there. They keep on popping up. Some of them are here. Some of them there. They're just part of showing how crazy the situation is in the Riverlands, because they are just heading off and causing wreck and ruin everywhere they go. Question from I had another question here. Mem saying, we have evidence of the old gods and Horolor at work. Do we see any evidence of the southern or other gods at work? Do you have a theory on the relationship between the gods and the higher mysteries? So always, when we're talking about the gods, we always have to come back to what George R. R. Martin has said, is we will never see the gods in A Song of Ice and Fire. We will never get evidence, pure, true evidence for the gods' existence or actions in A Song of Ice and Fire. However, obviously, we have the old gods. Now, it turns that the old gods is a different way of looking at gods. It's not just like a sort of a monotheistic idea of a god or a pantheistic idea of a god. The old gods, this is a lot closer to sort of nature worship, the trees. This is an embodiment of Westeros as a whole, and it's also embodying the souls, the spirits of people who have been and gone. So that's a lot more mystical and ephemeral in terms of old gods, but clearly there is magic involved in all of that. R'hllor, we see magical things happen. Melisandre, obviously, we see magical things happen there. The Faith of the Seven, as many people point out, we don't see much from them. There are rumors of healings and things like that, but no, we don't see huge amounts. Similarly, we don't see huge amounts from the drowned god, it has to be said. You get when somebody drowned and was brought back again, but how much of that is actually the god working and how much of that is just CPR or what, I don't know. There is magic in other faiths and other religions across Planetos. In terms of the ethereal relationship between the gods and higher mysteries, I will at some point, I've been threatening this for about 5 years, but I will at some point do a big video on the nature of magic in A Song of Ice and Fire. My general view is that a lot of people tend to try and categorize it and say this is based on the elements, or we get priestly magic and then we get other types of magic. I think that yes, there are different ways in, but it seems that magic, to me, it seems magic just operates up there and you can tap into it in different ways. So what's the relationship between the gods and higher mysteries, magic and the like? I think it's as simple as the gods provide an avenue, or worship provides an avenue through which you can access magic. That's, I think, as simple as it is. Clueless Fangle saying, did literally fall asleep listening to me. Well, good night, Clueless Fangle. I hope you sleep well. And she's probably already gone. Andrew K is saying, to me, all magical proofs, and there are different mediums or methods to access it, and all magic this universe is likely commonly sourced. Yes, I think I would agree with that. Let's go to a question from Jay saying, hi, Robert, first time Patreon question asker. Been a blast to catch up on your old videos since discovering your channels. In the show, well, welcome, first of all. And I should just say, that I always frame these around questions from my patrons, and that's just because I hugely appreciate the support I do get from my patrons. I genuinely cannot do what I do without my patron support. So if you would like to support this channel, or in Deep Geek more broadly, as we're now branching out a couple of channels, podcasts, secret, that will happen at some point, other things happening around the world. And I should also say, I'm on TikTok now. If you want to see me on TikTok, just go and look for In Deep Geek. I'm over there if you are a TikTok person. But patrons, thank you. If you would like to support In Deep Geek, the best way to do that is through Patreon. If you're watching live, there'll be a link in the live chat, wherever that is. If you're watching back a bit later, there's a link down in the description. But it's patreon.com/InDeepGeek. Anyway, Jay says, in the show, we see Samuel Tarly as a maester write A Song of Ice and Fire. How do you understand the limits of his perspective, blind spots, biases, etc.? And what do you think the implications of his retelling could be for how future Westerosis might understand this chapter in history? I love how George R. Martin plays with history. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. So on the show, they had Sam, who became Grand Maester, This is right at the very end. He became Grand Maester, and he brought in this big tome. He said, "This is the history of the story of what's just happened." The first history book, and then Tyrion flicks through and says, "Where am I?" And Sam says, "You're not in it at all." And Tyrion's like, "What?" And everyone has a good laugh. So that's the play that they did on the show. This does work or tie in, I think, quite well to how you, and you say that it's how George R. R. Martin kind of plays with history. He very clearly has set up two different ways of understanding experience history in his, we're talking slightly more meta literary way now, in his delivery mechanism, by which I mean we've got two different writing methods. The first is the point of view, which is what all of A Song of Ice and Fire and also the Duncan Egg stories are. They're from a person's point of view, the point that we may move around from place to place, but it's someone's lived experience. That gives us a real vibrant understanding of what's happening at a particular place and time. However, we see continually that the person whose point of view we have got does not understand everything that's happening around them, or they have biases. You see Cersei's biases coming through all the time. You see the chapter I was talking about a moment ago, waxing lyrical about Arya's chapter. Arya doesn't understand 75% of what's going on in that chapter. It's just going straight over her head. There's politics happening. She does not know. It's not her fault. Part of it was that she's just not old enough to understand. Part of it is she doesn't know the information we have. Part of it is stuff that nobody knows until much later. But that's the limit of first-hand experience. But then he shows us the second style of writing, this history book style from the Maesters, which is also limited because it's clearly written from the Maester's perspective. And although it collects together all these different points of view, it's the bits that we're shown and the bits that we're told to believe come from the biases of the person who wrote it. So George R. R. Martin is all the way through this, creating this meta world. He is giving us these two different ways of understanding, a way of logging what's been going on. And that is happening in-world as well, not just in how it's being presented to us. That's happening in-world as well. We have the books that the Maesters write, and I think, yes, we will get at the end the Maesters, even if it's just a throwaway comment, and the Maesters are already writing the history of what's going on. But we're also increasingly being shown that people and their experiences live on through the Weirwood tree, through Bran being able to experience going back through time and seeing things and experiencing things. Those people's lived experiences are still there. They retain, however, the same limitations and biases of the lived experiences as they were when they happened. So he is giving us these two, and he's allowing us to work our way through them and to come to our own understanding of what's really going on based on these two flawed ways of presenting the truth, in inverted commas. So yeah, I think he's doing a fantastic job with that. Whether they get Sam to write the history, I don't know. That's one of those things which will probably happen after the book's end. The Richard Smith, no, and Carl Karsnark, no, I'm not doing dancing on TikTok. Apologies to anyone who might have been wanting that. Let's go to actually, before that, the other people I want to thank my wonderful moderators. If you are watching this live and if you're enjoying the happy banter in the chat, you have got the moderators to thank, who do a fantastic job. If you are watching this live and you're in the chat, please just show them a little bit of love. Let's go to a question from George R. R. Tolkien. Reflective Rambling, no, I'm not going to get down the dog to dance. George R.R. Tolkien, salutations, Robert. Salutations to you too, sir. I was recently listening to A Dance with Dragons, and I was wondering why it is that Tyrion was unaffected by the grayscale after being touched in the face by it. Was it luck or something extra? So this is when he's going through the Sorrows, and the Stone Men are there. So these are people who've been affected by grayscale, and it's advanced. They are almost statues by this point. And we get this really good, really creepy chapter where the boat is passing through the ruins of Troyrain, the Sorrows. It's misty. There's a moment at which the boat passes under a bridge and then passes under a bridge again, and it's like, what happened there? And then they hear some splashes, and this is some of the Stone Men who've dived into the water, and they attack the boat, and Tyrion gets dragged under. He feels a hand against his face. He gets dragged out, and after it, a while later, we discover that John Connington, who was also there, he starts seeing that he's got grayscale. Now, Tyrion, we don't see this. So, how could he have escaped? Well, there's a few possible answers. Four that I can think of off the top of my head. One was that this was not actually the face of the Stone Man which touched him. This was actually John Connington grabbing for Tyrion, and in the fight, Tyrion didn't know who it was. That's one possible answer. Another possible answer is that we don't really understand how this is transferred. This is a magical disease. Is it just one touch and that's it? You're automatically getting it, or is it you can get touched by somebody several times and just get lucky and not catch it? Is it transferred by other means that we don't understand? Could it get washed off because it was underwater? We do not know. So maybe he was just lucky. We do not know. The third reason is that he's somehow immune. There are some people who've suggested maybe this is something about his genetics. He clearly has some sort of genetic quirks. He's got mismatched eyes. There's the dwarfism. Lots of things going on there. There are hints that maybe he's got some Targaryen blood. Lots of things going on. So maybe there is a plot reason. We don't know yet, but we'll find out later that he is immune. The fourth reason, which is the most intriguing, is that this is one of those things that just slipped through the net in a George R.R. Martin rewrite, which is he wrote an extra chapter. We know this. He's told us this. He wrote an extra chapter at this point in the story, another Tyrion chapter. In that chapter, Tyrion basically he loses track of his companions. He ends up in meeting the Shrouded Lord, who is the leader of these Stone Men, incredibly magical figure. Rumors that he might be Prince Garin, the person who started all of this centuries earlier. All big mysteries. And what happened to him, we don't know. We don't know because George R. R. Martin, having written the chapter at the last minute, he pulled it out of the book and said, actually, I don't want to go that way with Tyrion. But as far as we could understand, this would have taken Tyrion down a lot more of a magical path, and he was wanting to keep Tyrion more sort of grounded around more magic-y people, eventually like Dany and people like that, but he wanted Tyrion to stay more grounded, so he took out that chapter. So it's possible, as a fourth option, that Tyrion something happened to Tyrion in that chapter that explains it. Maybe he got cured by the Shrouded Lord, something like that. We don't know. So there are lots of options. My best guess is it's just one of those things. It's just we're never going to find out entirely. He can like stare at his hand and go, well, why didn't I get it? I don't understand. This feels a bit like if you read Duncan Egg at the end of the first story, he's there going, why is it that, you know, what's with this foot? This foot has cost the nation a prince. What does this foot now need to do something? This is the same kind of feeling that perhaps Tyrion could be getting. Why should he survive? What was special about him? Was it just chance? Was it fate? Was it something else? And we won't actually get the full answer. Let's go to Buck One Andy. Thank you so much for the super sticker. I hugely appreciate that. Lady Pushkin saying looks like George R. Martin is in the UK in that background photo. Yeah, I think that is. I think that's when he was in Northern Ireland. Actually, that picture. I could be wrong on that one, but I think that's where they took that for that Northern Ireland, obviously, which is where they filmed Game of Thrones. Let's go to Lady Pushkin saying, "Hello, Robert. A few thoughts. Who do you think the knight from the Stormlands was who wore Rhaella's favour at a tourney and she appeared to be in love with?" So this is a story, or it's not really a story so much as bits of information we pick up from a variety of different characters across the period of the books. Rhaella Targaryen, this was Aerys II, the Mad King's wife. Really tragic figure, very sad life. She appears to have been, before she was married, she appears to have fallen in love with a knight from the Stormlands who wore her favour in a tourney. But then we're told he, when she was married, he then set down his lance and he vowed chastity, to be a great knight, and became a faithful man from that, a man of the faith from that moment onwards. Now, almost certainly, this is somebody called Sir Bonifer Hasty, which is an odd name, but this is a character who does appear in the story. So he's an old knight at this point. He is the head of this group called the Holy 100. He starts out, we first hear of him, he sides with Renly. Renly dies, he sides with Stannis. Stannis dies, he sides with the Lannisters. So slightly shiftable position, but he then comes with Jaime. Jaime, his story, the last bit of the story that we have for Jaime is basically him heading through the Riverlands, claiming castles for the Lannisters, and he moves on to the next castle each time, but he has to leave somebody, and he leaves Sir Bonifer at Harrenhal with his Holy 100, or what is left of his Holy 100, and basically says, "Are you sure you can hold this with just that few people?" And then Sir Bonifer says, yes, of course, if we're true and just and stick to the ways of the faith of the Seven, everything will be well, which makes you think everything's not going to be well. But it seems to be him, and he doesn't seem to be a figure that, well, Jaime mocks him, calls him rude names behind his back, but he is a good knight, and his story is, I guess, quite sad as well. If he was in love and then couldn't marry the woman that he loved. Lady Pushkin's also asking, when Bran is in the cave, Bloodraven's cave, he walks into a raven, but there is a woman there already who Bloodraven says has long died, but a part remains of a woman of those who sing the song of the earth. Who could this be? Is it just George R. R. Martin telling us this, possibly leading up to John possibly walking into Ghost, then being resurrected? So, yeah, this is part of George R. R. Martin warming us up to this idea of you can walk into your bonded animal, and when you die, you can stay in there. In fact, that's quite a natural thing. This is at least 3 times we find this. We get it here. We get it with Orin with the eagle, and then we also get Varamir Sixskins. When a skin changer dies, they can go into their animal, and what we're told is that they stay there, but the longer that they linger, the less human they become. So when Bran goes into this raven, he discovers that there's somebody there already, or like an echo of somebody. Now, who this is, we are simply said that this is a woman of those who sing the song of the earth, and that is to say one of the children of the forest. That's how they refer to themselves. They don't call themselves children of the forest. They call themselves those who sing the song of the earth. So one of the children of the forest died, walked into this raven, and is still there. So it's foreshadowing, and I think there's also a foreshadowing thing here. It's not going to be exactly the same, but with Bran and Hodor, him walking into people is definitely going to be a big part of this story. Martin S. How much does it cost the Seven Kingdoms Royal Treasury, or whatever its name is, to have the dragons fed, or are the dragons let out to hunt? Okay, interesting. So a lot for a large dragon is the answer. Now, we get in Meereen, we get an issue. Dany is faced with this issue but she wants to just let her dragons roam around and feed themselves, but we find that then they're just stealing from farmers, and she has to pay reparations to the farmers whose sheep or whatever have just been eaten, and there's also a dead human body or remains of one, or what they're claiming is the remains of one, and she eventually gives in and says, okay, well, let's keep them in captivity, and they will have to be fed a lot. How much would it cost? We're not told the exact food needs of an adult dragon, but we're talking, I mean, it has to be at least a sheep a day, probably a lot more for a bigger dragon. So it would cost a significant amount to feed a dragon. When we're talking Westeros, obviously we haven't had dragons there since the Dragon Pit. The Dragon Pit also was another way of ensuring that dragons weren't going to be flying off everywhere and burning down random places. This was keeping them under control. Doesn't work. You can never keep a dragon under control. Question from Eldrick Stoneskin saying, bit of love for one of the OGs. Thank you for everything you do for the fandom. Well, thank you. I hugely appreciate that. Thank you very much. Cloaked One, picking up a question for Thomas Bonus. I love it when people do this, picking up questions for others. Thank you, Cloaked One. I appreciate it. Saying, hey, Robert, love all of your content. What are you most excited about for House of the Dragon in Season 2? All the best from Denmark. Well, hi there, Denmark. What am I most looking forward to in Season 2? There's so much. In terms of sort of in specific things, then Blood and Cheese, I'm both looking forward to and dreading. Seeing Harrenhal again will be, particularly Alice Rivers. I think that will be fantastic. I I think the Dragon Seeds will be a really interesting bit of TV. I'm really looking forward to seeing that develop. At a more sort of meta level, what I'm really looking forward to is how they develop some of the themes that they started in season 1. By which I mean things like you can't control dragons. I don't believe that they are going to, having introduced this 2, 3, 4 times in season 1, then just forget that and move on and just like say, oh, that was a season 1 thing. There will be other instances. So it's where they develop those kinds of themes into season 2 I'm absolutely fascinated for. And I think finally how they show, because they will have to come up with a lot of, say, extra material is probably the wrong way of saying it, but the build up to the Dance of the Dragons, we have a comparatively large amount of information on. The next bit of the story, the first segment of the war, we do still have a reasonable amount in Fire and Blood, but a lot less. So there will be extra stuff that they will need to add in. How are they going to be doing that? Particularly things that take place over 2 or 3 sentences dotted about in the book will probably turn into quite a big thing on the show, like Otto Hightower getting sidelined in Team Green, Otto Hightower getting pushed aside so he's no longer the Hand of the King. That kind of thing, I'd be absolutely fascinated how they show him lose his power. And then one other random thing, Helena and the Dragon Dreams. They almost everything she said or did in season 1 was prophetic. How are they going to bring that forward into season 2? I'm really looking forward to that. Reflective rambling, picking up for Jaylin Ever. For Jaylin. Ever noticed how Catelyn was on her 9th life? Beric lived and died 7 times. Catelyn got resurrected by Beric for her 2nd life. 7 plus 2 equals 9, so she sort of has 9 lives like a cat. Wow, I've not that's the first I've had that. So 7 plus 2 is 9. So yeah, 9th life. Like it. That's good. One other thing to do with Cat, which I find, or Catelyn, which I find fascinating, if you've not picked up on this, this is a deliberate thing from George R. Martin. Arya clearly has lots of different pseudonyms and names, but one of the most significant ones is Cat of the Canals. And Sansa doesn't have lots of different names, but the one which is most significant, which she has at the moment, is Elaine. So her 2 daughters are called Cat and Elaine. Catelyn, which is really quite nice. I like that. LD saying, do we know anything about the spiritual beliefs of the first men before the pact with the children? Where in Essos might they originate from? Well, no, we're not really told huge amounts about this. They clearly weren't anything. They didn't care about nature. They were chopping down trees and things. So it wasn't that. I think the short answer is we don't know. They were in Essos and came across... so they were in sort of southwest Essos. There were lots of lost cultures around then. I wish we had a better answer on that one. But apologies, we don't. I suppose one of the clues that we could have is the colouring. So the first men colouring is Northerners colouring. So more often sort of dark hair, that kind of thing, lighter skin. They appear not to, therefore, have come from the far east of Essos or even towards the south with like Sosthorios or anything like that. My best guess is they were somewhere around what we now think of as the disputed lands and the the Free Cities, that kind of area in southwest Westeros, and they just moved across. Question from Nicole Knock saying, "Hello, Robert. Love your takes on A Song of Ice and Fire. Thank you. Do you think there will be a time skip in A Dream of Spring, or will Bran be a child king? How do you see the end timeline?" I think we're not going to have a time skip. There might be one right at the end. We might get a little bit of a skip right at the end, but I don't think from now, the action is moving so fast in all these different places. I don't think there's a logical place for there to be a sort of a, let's just pause for a moment. Everything has to now keep on moving. Now, things could keep on moving. They will take a while still. So just to give a sense of some sort of timing, Dany is currently up in Vaes Dothrak. She's got to deal, or is on her way to Vaes Dothrak. She's got to deal with whatever is there, come back down to Meereen, sort out what's going on in Meereen, and then amass the fleet, sail the fleet all the way across to Westeros, probably stopping off a few places en route. If she does that in less than 9 months to a year, that would be ridiculously fast. So the time span of the Winds of Winter is probably at least a year, which, when you think about it, probably adds in, it makes the book even bigger because there's lots of things that could happen in that year. But we're looking at a reasonable time span there. Then, I mean, who knows what will happen in The Dream of Spring, but then maybe that could be another couple of years. If so, we're looking at Bran being still a child, but sort of nearly teenage age. So, yes, not a child king, but something along those lines. Have I got another question? I think I have somewhere. Richard Smith asking, are there any theories you've done videos on that you now disagree with? Have you changed your mind since? That was an interesting question. I have been going back through my videos quite recently, and I've started redoing. So the recent videos I've done on the Faceless Men, I have those were ones I did years ago, and so I have gone back to them and re-researched them. Broadly speaking, I still agree with what I was doing there, so I've re-scripted them as well. Broadly speaking, I still agree with what I was thinking about there. I suspect when I get to a couple of things like what all of the visions in the House of the Undying are about, I think I've probably shifted a little bit on that. I think yeah, I can't think of any major things I've shifted my opinion on. I like to, which actually is quite disappoints me in a way, because I like to have an open mind about these things. If I find something I have and I go back through my videos, then I will definitely let you know on here, because I think this is a really good thing to stay open minded about about what we've got here, and also to try and avoid the kind of groupthink that is always going to happen when you have something like this and you've got a decade or more with no new information. So one thing perhaps that I have changed my mind on, I'm sure I'll think of more actually, but the longer I think about it, I was very sure, I don't know if I did a full video on it, but I was very sure that the Targaryens were not being guided by prophecy in order to oppose the others. The theory came out, I mean, it had been around before, but the theory sort of started getting a bit popular just before Fire and Blood, when George R. R. Martin sort of had a promo interview, and he said, some have suggested that perhaps Aegon the Conqueror had a prophecy about the others, and that was why he invaded. And I can remember not quite scoffing at it, but of the view, which I still hold, that this is very odd. If he did have that, why on earth didn't he go to the wall? Surely that would be his priority. Why didn't he head north and as a priority and go and see what was going on there? That did not make sense to me. I think now, given what George R. Martin has said about House of the Dragon, that now seems pretty locked in. So I think there's still some gaps in our knowledge and understanding of that. But yeah, I've shifted my mind on that one. Martin S. How does the Seven Kingdoms taxing system work? Oh, excellent. Does each kingdom collect taxes from its inhabitants and then pay them to the Iron Throne in King's Landing? Or is there another way of organizing this? Well, it's a variety of taxes. So taking the Crown lands are owned by the Crown. So King's Landing and the area just around there, owned by the Crown. So the Crown can levy taxes direct from King's Landing. And we see this several times, particularly in Fire and Blood, also in A Song of Ice and Fire. We need more money. What should we do? We'll put a tax on the city gates. We'll put a tax on, I don't know, people staying overnight in hostels or something. That's the kind of thing. And so there is a direct taxation that goes to the Iron Throne's coffers from King's Landing and its immediate environs. Added to which, there is the Iron Throne can impose specific trade-related taxes, Seven Kingdoms wide. Now, we see this happen a few different times. We get the Mad King, Aerys II. He tripled port fees across the Seven Kingdoms. This got Tywin really angry because this basically really hurt what was happening in Lannisport. So that was really damaging him. And then Aerys II, he reduced them back down again, but told everyone that it was Tywin who put them up, and then he ordered them brought back down again. So it's clear that there is a direct taxation of some sort with trade or port taxes. But then there's the wider system, which seems to operate on quite a feudal model. So you would get, for example, in the north, each lord collects their taxes, tithes, whatever it is, from the area that is theirs, from the people around that area. And this can be money, or it could be goods and services. We read about there being, Jamie mentions just in passing about a particular area has a number of granaries or windmills, and this would therefore provide quite a big income for whoever owned that land. So clearly you can be taxing that in your local area, and so the money comes up, and then the money comes up through the system from the normal folk, the small folk, up to the local lord. That goes from the local lord all the way up to the Lord Paramount, and then they presumably are sending money on up to the Iron Throne. So we see three different tax systems. There are a few other ad hoc things here or there, but for the coffers of the Iron Throne, King's Landing direct taxation on pretty much whatever they want to do, some sort of direct taxation on trade and ports, and then a more feudal system where the money sort of goes up from the bottom up towards the top. And then you get some, for example, actually, I should just say, when I say sometimes these things are paid in goods and services, what you'll find is that the gift and the new gift, which is the areas south of the wall, they were given to the Night's Watch to support them, the idea being this kind of like feudalistic model. But those people who are there, this is hard land to be farming, and so a lot of them paid their dues in goods. They would here's some seal skins. Here's some of the grain that we've got. Here's this. Here we can come and help out doing a little bit of repair over here to one of these castles. That kind of thing. So it's not all just about cash. It's often about you pay your dues with what you can offer. And in return, obviously, the Lord then has some obligations to the small folk to protect them in times of war and things like that. Let's go to a question from King of Imps saying, hello, Robert. A silly question that I ask all my friends who are into both Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire. Imagine for a moment you are some learned person. This is one, I'll throw this out to the chat as well, because this is quite a fun question. Imagine for a moment you are some learned person from Westeros or the Free Cities, and you know more or less everything about Planetos. One fine evening, through some magical means, Sauron comes into the chambers. And he insists that you pick 9 men to whom to give the rings of the Nazgul so that he can start fresh on a new world. Which 9 unlucky mortals of Westeros or Planetos do you give the rings to? For argument's sake, let's say this happens at the end of Game of Thrones. So, by all means in the chat, who do you think Sauron would pick at the end of Game of Thrones to become his 9 most loyal servants? I think what I would say, first of all, is we probably wouldn't know everyone, because the world of Planetos is huge. Westeros is just a small part of it. Essos is many times the size of Westeros, extends even further east than we know about. Sartorius we know hardly anything about. I suspect that he would want people in these different places. Of the characters we know, assuming at the end of the TV show you're talking about here, I think King Bran would probably be the person he would want most. Not only is he already a king, therefore powerful, but also clearly incredibly magical. So that would be one person he would go for. I suspect he would probably go for another magician somewhere over in Ashai, maybe. But then in terms of some people with ambition, some people with great military prowess, maybe the Dothraki are wiped out, but the Jogos Nhai over towards the ET, maybe they've got a great warlord over there. And then I don't know, maybe somebody in one of the Free Cities as well. I'd love to know what you go. Eldrick Stoneskin saying he'd for sure pick Euron and Ramsay. Yeah, if they were still around. Tywin, Caius Savage, Walder Frey, Dr. Professor 756 saying finally Hodor's time to shine. Yeah, absolutely. So Gaius Ballerina saying Bloodraven, Tywin, Roose, Walder Frey, and at least one Targ. Yeah, so Lucian, slightly left field, but good, I like it, saying I feel like Sauron would relish the chance to corrupt the incorruptible. Barristan, for example. Yeah, I think that would be a really good call. Let's Ranabir Mitra saying all the heads of the 9 kingdoms. It's 9 kingdoms, not 7. Yeah, absolutely. So that makes a lot of sense. Alison saying, hello, Robert. Hi. Several characters throughout the books speak of winter with dread, but winters have come and gone in Westeros. Some are easier, some are harder. My question is, how do you think the winter that is now arriving in Westeros will compare to previous winters? Is there a winter in the past that you think it may resemble? Or are there no other winters like this one? Well, the short answer is that there are no other winters like the one that's coming. And there's a normal, boring answer, and then there's the sort of the magical answer to that. The boring answer is because this was a very, very long summer, 9 years summer. And everybody says if you get a long summer, you get a long, hard winter. which seems to be happening. So we can look at what is happening already, leaving aside the second part of the equation, which is the others. What is already happening? It's already snowing as far south as the Riverlands. When you get to the far north, the Night's Watch at Castle Black have largely abandoned moving around above ground. They do still a bit, but they've got tunnels underground. The snow is getting so thick, it's just easier to move around underground. When you get to Winterfell, it is so cold. There are 7 gates to Winterfell. It's so cold that 6 of those gates are frozen shut already. And when Theon escapes with Jane Poole, he jumps off a massively high wall into a snowdrift, and the snowdrift is tens of feet high. This is stories and stories high of snow we've got already going on at Winterfell. This is a really, really tough winter, and it's literally only just started. We're not even into the depths of it yet, so it's already really bad. It should be really bad because of the long summer. But then it's going to be even worse because of the others. And if you go back and you read the prologue to Book 1 of Game of Thrones, and you see firsthand what happens when the others are close, the temperature just drops. It just absolutely sinks. You see all of this, and the trees suddenly ice up. The air just suddenly just becomes still. This is just, it's like this wall of freezing air just moves in. This is the power of the others. So this is not only like already a really big bad winter, but when the others come south, it's going to get so much worse. This is going to be almost impossible to survive kind of weather. Is there an example of something that bad? There was a bad winter actually just before Robert's Rebellion. That's the last really bad one. That was so bad that there were ice, the River Blackwater all the way down to the Blackwater Rush that froze. There were icicles hanging from the ramparts of King's Landing. This was even colder than we've had so far in the books. It was really bad. But the one we're about to have, is going to be even worse. Question from Martin S. Saying, I think the Varys quote, "Power resides where men believe it resides," is astute. I think it is kind of a universal rule. It even works for modern countries. Sure, the law affects this, but people must then believe in the law. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that completely. It's power resides where people believe it reside. It's yeah, I don't think I can add much to that. That was an astute comment. Lady Pushkin saying, you also had a question regarding Brandon Ice Eyes Stark and any relation to the Night King or Queen. Yeah, you did. Sorry if I missed that one. Yeah, so what do you make of the old Brandon Stark? They refer to it as Ice Eyes and the blood sacrifices to the Heart Tree. So this is a character we don't know huge amounts about this character, to be honest. It is another Brandon Stark. This is a Brandon who liberated the Wolf's Den, which is in White Harbour. It is an ancient castle in White Harbour, and liberated it from some slavers in the middle of winter, and then did rather gruesome things, cut out their entrails and hung them over the weirwood tree. There's weirwood tree there in the Wolf's Den as a sort of a sacrifice. So is this any relation to the Night King or Queen? This happened millennia later, so I think no is the short answer. The Ice Eyes thing sounds mysterious, and it sounds quite sinister, given that the sort of the links across to the others and blue eyes and things like that. I think we just do not have the evidence on this one. I'd love to sort of speculate and say yes, this does sound very, but what happened after that? We don't get any other story after that. We're just told this is what happened. The end. Then presumably his children took over, and the descendants carried on down the line of the Starks. If this had been the Night's King reborn in some way, I don't think that would have happened. I don't think that would have been the main part of the story. We don't get and they were evil and they got overthrown story. So I think this is just a particularly brutal Stark who wished to send a message, is my take. And Ice Eyes, I think, is probably just a way of reflecting the character of the person, as well as possibly they had blue eyes. Let's go to a question from Gabriel Farrell, saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you're well. I am, thank you. I doubt I'm the only person to ask this, and I'm sure you'll touch on it anyway, but how do you think the WGA writers' strike, I think that's the Writers Guild of America, writers' strike, will affect season 2 of The House of the Dragon? Given how far previously well-received shows fell during the last writers' strike 15 years ago, Lost, Heroes, etc., and how important rewrites can be, is there a serious concern for you that House of the Dragon might suffer significantly as a result?" 444 also said, how do you think that the strike will affect HBO's A Song of Ice and Fire adaptations? What about House of the Dragon? Scripts are ready, they're filming. Nonetheless, any change in script can be done after the strike. Previous strike lasted over 3 months. May House of the Dragon or any other show we expect to return in 2024 be delayed up to 2025? Okay, so this is, for those who've missed this, do not worry if you did. This is a Writers Guild, so Writers Union in America, effectively, who are on strike. I have to admit, I don't know the details of this, why they're on strike, so I'm not going to comment on that at all, other than to note that there will obviously be impacts on TV shows. Now, as for House of the Dragon, what we've been told is the scripts have all been written for House of the Dragon. They've now started filming, so they're moving ahead with the filming. So theoretically, there's no impact on House of the Dragon. I say theoretically because in reality, things happen. You could be filming something, somebody could get an injury and they have to reshoot a scene and make it slightly different. They film something and realize it doesn't quite work. Stuff happens. There are almost always rewrites of to some degree during a show's filming. Now, does that matter? I mean, my instinct is, as long as this isn't a very long strike, then I don't think that does matter for House of the Dragon, because House of the Dragon is going to shoot over, I don't know, my best guess is 10 months. That's certainly how long it took them to film season 1. Even if this is another 3-month strike again, the writers could be back up and running by 3 months' time, and then they've still got a lot of time to make any changes and then film it at the end. So as long as this strike isn't hugely long, then this isn't going to impact, in my view, House of the Dragon. What it could impact is things that are in development. So Dunk and Egg, for example. If we did have another 3-month strike, then my best understanding is that means that Dunk and Egg script will not be being written for 3 months. Now, how far are they in that? Well, apparently the episode 1, it's going to be 6 episodes in Dunk and Egg season 1. Episode 1 is written. George R. Martin said he was very happy with it. They've got 5 more episodes which are in the process of being written. So that will slow things down. They seemed, from the hints we got, they seemed to still be quite early on in this, to the extent that George R. R. Martin was still just saying, when he did his blog post just after the announcement, that it's probably going to be 6 episodes. But if they're still trying to figure out how many episodes it is, they're still quite early on in the process. So that could slow down Dunk and Egg. Now, Dunk and Egg we're not expecting for a while anyway, so we probably won't notice any huge difference. So I think I'm, at the moment, unless this carries on for a long time, I think I'm not that concerned in terms of TV shows. I think Rings of Power might be a slightly different issue. Clearly, that's already been written, but they're coming towards the end of their filming period, or they're a good part of their way through that. And so if they have to do any rewrites now, that could be a problem. Maybe they would then just call people back for a few reshoots or something later. But long story short, as long as this isn't a very long one, I think we're going to be okay. Let's go to a question from Howland's little sister saying, "Good day to you, Robert. Starks have twice walked away from the Iron Throne. Cregan Stark at the end of the Dance of the Dragons and Eddard Stark at the end of Robert's Rebellion. They had it in their power to take over, but they chose not to do so. What are your thoughts about the symbolism of the earlier Starks having power within their grasp and being of a more honourable nature and not taking the throne? I feel confident that Bran will complete this Stark path to the seat of power once the final book is written. It seems appropriate for Bran to complete this and finally be offered the throne. At the end, honour will win." Yeah, so I like this idea. I don't know whether I fully sign up to this. Either of them could have been king and decided not to. I don't think that Cregan Stark ever actively wanted to be king. It wasn't a thing, a thought that crossed his mind at all. And the Maesters, from their perspective, thought, well, he could have been king and claimed it and nobody could have stopped him. But I don't think it was ever in Cregan Stark's mind to do that. Similarly, Ned Stark, yes, he was first in to King's Landing. Could he have claimed the throne? He could, but then he was already facing the Lannister army there, and Robert Baratheon had already declared that he was going, and this would be a huge betrayal of him. This wasn't just he could take it and nobody would argue with him. There would have been even more civil war if Ned Stark had claimed the throne. And again, I don't think he wanted it. I don't think he wanted to be king. So this, I think, is a real Starkish kind of thing. John, incidentally, he kind of really embodies this. He doesn't necessarily want power, but power is given to him. So would Bran becoming king sort of complete this, echo this in a good way? Yeah, I guess so. Because the question you have to ask with Bran is whether he would want it or not. Is he, by this point, completely subsumed within the Weirwood Network, and the Weirwood Network are very happy, thank you very much, to be taking over control? Or do we have Bran who is not wanting to be king? He might say, I don't want to be king, but whether he would actually mean that, I don't know. Let's go to question from Johnny Sariani saying, "Hello, Robert. Can you please give us a rundown on who Quaithe is? What does she want? Where does she come from? Who might she secretly be? With what we already know may happen from the show, as well as some detailed theories and logical guesses, where do you see Quaithe, or the person she truly is, at the end of the story? If it goes similar to the show and Jon kills Dany, will this mean Bloodraven's champion killing her champion? What does she do after that?" Well, so Quaithe is a fascinating figure. For those struggling to place her, she is, we saw her on the TV show briefly. Dany meets her in in Karth. She's got this lacquered mask on, which is a sign of somebody who comes from Ashai. Dany meets her. Quaithe is one of the three who come out and see Dany and the dragons before deciding to let her into Karth. Then Dany meets her in Karth unexpectedly. She turns around and there's Quaithe, and Quaithe sort of mutters a few things to her, mysterious stuff. This is where we get the to go west, you must go east thing, and she's going, well, so what? I should go. I want to go west because I want to go back to Westeros, but you're telling me I need to go east. What's east? Ashai. So she seems to have been the character who George R. R. Martin initially was going to get Dany to Ashai before he changed his mind on that one. Then she keeps on cropping up in Dany's mind, in visions, in dreams, and she gives this list of people that Dany shouldn't trust, basically. People like the perfumed seneschal, people like that. You don't trust this, don't trust that person. And she ends it all with this, remember who you are, Daenerys Targaryen. The dragons remember, do you? So that's her role. She doesn't seem to need to be there with Dany to be counseling her, to be telling her what she thinks that she should be doing. So who is she? Well, we've got a few clues. We know that she comes ostensibly from Ashai, but we also know that she speaks perfect common Westerosi. We know that she's a magic user because she manages to speak to Dany from afar. We know that she wants Dany not to trust people, only to trust herself. And she wants Dany to regain her Targaryenness. The dragons know who you are, do you? So who is this? Well, there are lots of suggestions out there. My personal favorite idea is that this is Shira Seastar. Shira Seastar was one of the great bastards of Aegon IV, the same generation as we get Bloodraven, as we get Daemon Blackfire, Aegor Rivers, that lot. She was obviously from Westeros, so she speaks perfect Westerosi. She's a magic user. She's known so that we don't know much about her magic, but keeping her youthful looks seems to be a part of this. We know that she sort of disappears from the pages of history. Perhaps when we get to Fire and Blood Part 2, we will discover what happened. But we also know, obviously, that she's a Targaryen. Now, how does this fit in? So it fits the clues. I just had a random, and I haven't yet worked out whether this is tinfoil or whether this might actually be true, but my random thought I had just as I was preparing for this live stream was perhaps we do know where Shira Seastar went, because we get when Aegon V, this is Egg, reaches towards the end of his rule, and so this is within the lifetime of Bloodraven et al. Bloodraven at the beginning of Egg's rule goes up to the wall, and Shira Seastar, we believe, must have stayed down south. We're not told, but Egg grows obsessed with the idea of hatching dragon's eggs, and he gets some magic users, pyromancers from Ashai. Now, I suddenly made this link. As I say, I haven't worked out yet whether this is tinfoil or whether this is like a massive brainwave of brilliance, probably somewhere between the two. What if Shira Seastar was the person who went to Ashai somebody had to. So maybe she was the person who went to Ashai in order to get those pyromancers to go back to Westeros. It makes sense that she, all the people that of her generation, they left and gone. Bloodraven had gone. Daemon Blackfire he'd been killed. Aegor Rivers, he's now gone over to Essos, founding the Golden Company. what about her? Now's her time to move on as well. She's a magic user, so she will be fascinated by Ashai already. It makes sense that she goes over there. Perhaps that's when she learns even more magic, gets her longevity, keeping her alive. She puts on the lacquered mask. And then comes back to Karth and discovers a Targaryen with dragons. At which point, what's she going to do? She now has a new purpose. She's going to get this Targaryen to reclaim the Iron Throne, to be heading west. And probably while she's in Ashai, she will have gained some knowledge about the Long Night and the importance of dragons and Targaryens in fighting the others. This is now her champion. Dany is now Quaith's champion, Shira Seastar's champion, the person, Azor Ahai reborn, the person that she thinks is going to go and defeat the others. So she is now trying to prompt her to be more Targaryen, to trust no one else, to embrace the dragony side of her character, and to go west, invade. So that's what makes sense for me. It makes sense of what Quaith as a character seems to be trying to do. She seems to be trying to get Dany to be more Targaryen and invade Westeros. And it adds this poetic balance. Bloodraven and Shira Seastar were lovers. They get separated. They seem to have shared a passion for magic as well. They get separated. They both know that the Long Night is coming. The others are coming. They're both looking for a champion, the prince that was promised. They know the prophecies. Bloodraven stays in Westeros and thinks he finds his person, Jon Snow. Shira Seastar heads over to Essos, thinks she finds her person, Daenerys. They both have their champions. And then, yeah, as you say, what happened on the show, Jon killing Dany, would therefore be one champion killing the other. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Ranabir Mitra saying, under this idea, Aegon V, she was 60 plus when she left for Ashai. I get the bathing in blood logic, but 60 plus and going to Ashai. Yeah, it's entirely possible that she could have done that. I don't see a problem with her being sick if she was using magic to keep herself youthful. Eric Harker saying, I don't think my super chat went through, although it says I already paid for it. Try again. I can't see any more super chats here. Just put your question in the chat and I'll try and pick that up. Andrew K saying Quaith also has a lot of star imagery, masks and whispers of starlight, stars swirling around her. Yes, absolutely. And yep. So Lady Pushkin saying, would expect Quaith to be Targaryen. Really, any other missing task it could be that are using mask as a glamour. I don't mean I think the mask is just that's a thing from Ashai, and she doesn't want people to know who she is. So let's go with a question from 444. Do you suspect that some topics or themes that George R. R. Martin showed in Fire and Blood Volume 1 will have echoes and rhymes in The Winds of Winter? Similar to how Bloodraven and Blackfire's rebellion, the Blackfire rebellions rhyme or echo with Duncan Egg stories and A Dance with Dragons. Maybe we'll see in The Winds of Winter a new Vulture King, echoes of the story of Otto and Alicent in the Old Town storyline, rhymes of Corlys and Alan's adventures in the life of Owain Waters. Yeah, so all of these are possible. I definitely agree. I've said this before. You say Cersei or Daenerys sharing similar mistakes to Rhaenyra. I definitely see a link between what happened with Rhaenyra in the Dance of the Dragons in King's Landing and what is likely to happen with Cersei. Cersei, we've already seen this. The last chapter we have of this book is the one from Kevin Lannister's perspective. He ends up being killed at the end of it. he, through this, basically he's ruling King's Landing, and Cersei is constantly trying to go, well, we should be taxing people more, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, and a lot of these things, we should be putting more heads on spikes. A lot of these kind of things have echoes of what Rhaenyra did when she came to King's Landing. And so I could see Cersei echoing those behaviors, and then in the same way that Rhaenyra had to just escape from King's Landing, I don't think Cersei's going to sit in King's Landing for the rest of the 2 books. I think that she will have to escape King's Landing because the people turn against her. The people, all the hints we're getting is the people will love Aegon the Sixth, and they will hate her, particularly if she does something like destroying the Great Sept, which is not just a precision strike killing the High Sparrow plus the Tyrells, which is what she's thinking. This will take out innocent civilians as well. She will not be loved. Let's go to... okay, Eric Harker, this is your question, saying, who would you like to see narrate The Winds of Winter after the late, great Roy Dotrice has passed away a few years ago? Yeah, so when George R. R. Martin has finished The Winds of Winter, it will be done as an audiobook. The person who had narrated the previous audiobooks, Roy Dotrice, did pass away a few years ago, so they will need to find a new person. Who? Now, I think there are a lot of candidates, a lot of people could do this, but my take is that this is a nearly unique job in that A Song of Ice and Fire it's a world record for an audiobook for the number of different character voices that have been used. Roy Dotrice was an actor, and he did try and put on different voices, different accents for all the different characters he came across. I think that whoever we get should be able to do something similar, or at least attempt something similar. So who could we possibly get? I always forget his name, but the guy who was Viserys in Game of Thrones season 1, he narrated the Duncan Egg stories, and I thought did an Harry Lloyd. There we go. I thought did a fantastic job. I think he's my top pick for doing it. I could certainly entertain guy who was Ser Jorah. I think he is also a fantastic narrator, and the person who's done Fire and Blood, I've forgotten his name off the top of my head, but I think he did. Harry Lloyd. If I had to pick a person, it would be Harry Lloyd. Luna Cascade, Patreon question. Greetings from the US. Third attempt. When Dany was in the House of the Undying, she had a vision of 3 tearing at her flesh. What does it mean? Did you... So in the House of the Undying, I'm just trying to work out which bit you're talking about here. So if this is when she actually gets finally to the Undying, and the Undying themselves start ripping at her flesh, or attacking her, and then she has a vision. While this is happening, she is having a vision of all the people saying Misa, Misa, like that. That was not a vision. If this is what you're talking about, that was not a vision. That was what was actually happening. And thankfully, Drogon was on hand to save her. In terms of vision of people tearing at her flesh, there was also a vision of a woman. I think it was perhaps even the first vision that was seen of a woman with a lot of rat-like dwarf characters. It was quite a grim image, biting and scratching at this woman's body. That the generally accepted interpretation of that is that was a representation of what was happening in Westeros with the War of the Five Kings. The woman being the Seven Kingdoms, and the kings being these creatures who are destroying it by their actions. Let's go to Mars of House Bars saying, 2 questions if you don't mind. Of course, do we know if Maester Aemon had a Valyrian steel link in his chain? We do not know, is the short answer. We do get a brief description of it at one point, and we get told of a few different materials that are there. None of those things that we're told are Valyrian steel, so we don't have an exact. We don't have full proof. We are told that Maester Luwin and Maester Marwyn both do. We're told that not many do. Personally, I think I would be very surprised if Maester Aemon did not study the higher powers, the magic, basically, when he was in Old Town. He seems absolutely fascinated by it, prophecy in particular. So I would be shocked if he didn't. But we're not told it, so we don't have confirmation of that. You also asked, why did the waif hate Arya so much? This is a book/TV show question, because in the book she's not friendly to her. She's quite nasty to her, but she doesn't have the same visceral hatred as on the show. She mostly is just there as somebody who's helping the faceless men. So she's the person who brings the drink for Arya, which makes her go blind. She's the person who teaches her how to operate when she is blind, that kind of thing. So she's the person who is involved on behalf of the faceless men in Arya's training. On the show, obviously, the waif really did seem to dislike Arya. I think they did that because Jaqen, they wanted to keep sort of aloof and mysterious, and they wanted to build up this concept of identity for Arya, which is important on Arya's journey, is that whether or not she truly is becoming no one, whether she's giving up her identity. And in order for us to feel that tension, they had to have somebody who was constantly saying, no, you're not becoming no one, you are still being Arya Stark. So I think they ramped up on the TV show, they ramped up the waif's role to show us that character journey in a way that is sort of happening in the books, but in a more sort of obvious way. Luna Cascade asking, what happened to Maester Marwyn? Has George said? Do you think he will? Maester Marwyn has... We saw him in Sam's last chapter. Sam arrives down in Old Town. Maester Marwyn sends his lackeys out to get Sam, bring him up to his chambers. He basically quizzes him for some time and admits that he's been spying on him. Spying on him on his journey south. And it's all quite creepy. And then once he's got all the information he thinks he can from him, because Sam is passing on information from Maester Aemon, at that point, Marwyn just jumps up, grabs his bag and says, right, I'm going to Daenerys. So has George told us any more? That's all he said. He's going to Daenerys. And so at some point, he will pitch up, I suspect, in Meereen. This is part of a very small part of the Meereenese knot, which was the thing that the last time George R. R. Martin was struggling to finish a book, it was because he was struggling with what he called the Meereenese knot, which was, in what order does everybody arrive in Meereen? Because lots of different characters arrive in Meereen, meeting Dany. We've seen some of them already. We've got Quentin Martell, who arrives there We've now got Tyrion's arriving down there. Obviously, Barristan arrived a lot earlier. We've got, who else? We've got Victarion's arriving there. Marwyn's on his way there. We've got lots of characters arriving there. And he wanted to set out the order in which these things happen. And he tried it in lots of different ways. He was never quite happy. Sometimes he wrote a few chapters and then had to scrap them and rewrite them because he changed his mind on the order, and he called it the Myronese Knot. But Marwyn is almost certainly the last person to arrive, and he might even arrive when Danny gets back, after Danny gets back from Vaes Dothrak. Andrew Case saying, with the Faceless Men, Arya seems a dream candidate for their aims. The access that comes from her being highborn and a skin changer, no less. Yeah, absolutely. And also already being willing to, not having scruples about killing at a very young age, and showing an ability to blend in and be someone that she wasn't. I think this, and this is probably the next but one on my Faceless Men series, is why did Jaqen choose Arya? And I think that this is a big part of it. Is he looked and he got, well, that's an exceptionally talented child there who is happy to kill people, who has got an amazing ability right from the beginning to hide what her identity is, to blend into her surroundings, an ideal candidate. And the skin changing thing just adds to it. Yeah. Question from Catherine Furseth saying, what will lead the wall to come down, or at least make it possible for the others to pass? We all speculate, but I've yet to hear a really excellent suggestion. In A Dance with Dragons, Bran 1, Bran is thinking about something Old Nan said. Beyond the wall, the monsters live, the giants and the ghouls, the stalking shadows and the dead that walk, but they cannot pass so long as the wall stands strong and the men of the Night's Watch are true. Might this actually provide us with a theory? The wall is physical, but it's also a symbol and magical. The wall doesn't just need to stand, but stand strong, and the men of the Night's Watch must be true. Does this mean that an untrue, divided, morally declining Night's Watch filled with men who break their vows can somehow weaken the wall and cause it to fall? Not literally, but figuratively, making it possible for the others and the dead to pass. Even Jon broke his vows. Can this decline in the Night's Watch be connected to the fall of the wall? So I love this idea. I mean, I think that let me just pick up a couple of things before I come back around to this idea. What happened on the show, we know categorically is not going to happen in the books. We're told that episode where they go north of the wall and the others capture, the White Walkers capture a dragon, kill it, make it into an ice dragon, and then that dragon comes and burns a hole in, or melts a hole in the wall, or whatever it is. That is something they came up with. They've been very clear about this. They say, I think it was in Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon, is they specifically say they had to come up with a way for the wall to come down, which is very clear in telling us that whatever reason George R. R. Martin, because he will have told them how the others get south of the wall, how the wall is breached. He will have told them, but whatever it is something that they had not included in the story thus far. So either this is something that they just thought, well, we can't easily show that, or it's something that they just excluded. Like, and the top candidate here is the Horn of Winter. They did not include the Horn of Winter plot at all in the show. We saw a shot of the Horn of Winter, or what probably was the Horn of Winter, but that's about it. So That's the top answer really at the moment. But this I find an absolutely fascinating one. The idea that the wall and its defenses are tied in with the Night's Watch, which would make perfect sense. And if going from your quote here from Old Nan, they cannot pass so long as the wall stands strong and the men of the Night's Watch are true. So there are two parts there. The wall standing strong. Is the wall standing strong? Well, it is kept standing strong by the builders. And the builders, 1/3 of the Night's Watch, their entire job was to repair cracks and keep the wall sound. That was all that they did. Now, what we're told, I don't have the quote in front of me, unfortunately, but what we're told is that back in the old day, they could repair all the things and also keep on making it higher and stronger. But now the best that they could do is just to try and paper over all of the cracks that appear every now and then. So, is it standing strong? Probably not as strong as it was. Are the Night's Watch being true? Well, first thing to note is that the Night's Watch numbers are hugely diminished. At the start of the story, there was about 1,000 of them. They have abandoned all castles. There are, I think, 17 castles across the wall. They've abandoned all but 3. Castle Black, the Shadow Tower, and Eastwatch by the Sea. So they've got one in the middle, one at the far right, one at the far left. That's what they've got left. And we're told there's about 1,000. So we've got about 600 in Castle Black, 200 at either end. Then we get the Great Ranging. General Mormont heads north of the wall. We get 300 from Castle Black go, plus 100 from the Shadow Tower. Almost nobody returns. After that, we get a couple of battles. All of this diminished the numbers of the Night's Watch. When John gets elected, we're told that there were 588 votes cast, which tells us immediately, because everybody got a vote. That's how it worked. The closest thing we have to democracy in Westeros is at the Night's Watch. Even those who could not come to Castle Black, they had proxy votes, other people voting for on their behalf. So 588 votes in total, 588 members of the Night's Watch. Now, that immediately tells us that probably right now they're not looking after the cracks in the wall. The wall itself is not being well maintained, but also the number is incredibly diminished, and the quality of the people is a lot worse than it used to be. This is criminals being brought up from the black cells in King's Landing as much as anyone else. And as you rightly point out, people are breaking their vows. John breaks his vow. As Lord Commander, he breaks his vow. He says he is heading south. Who is now going to be manning the wall? Well, he's now sending out wildlings to go populate some of the towers, some of the castles along the wall. This is not the Night's Watch anymore who are actually guarding the wall. What happens when he comes back, John? What happens if he says, okay, the wildlings can now look after the wall. I'm heading down to Winterfell with the Night's Watch. I suspect that the Night's Watch who killed John will get killed themselves. And there's a sort of an irony here. They are the ones who are upholding. We instinctively don't like them because they killed John, but they are the ones who are upholding the Night's Watch vows. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch said, I hereby renounce my vow and I am going away from the wall. I don't care. I know my job is to stay here. I know the others are coming, but I'm going down to Winterfell. Who's coming with me? They were the ones actually who wanted to stick by their vows. So they are the true and faithful Night's Watch from one perspective. John is not. If they get hunted down and killed, as they probably will, who's left? And if John takes a sizable amount of them down with him to Winterfell, Are the Night's Watch staying true? Are the Night's Watch even guarding the wall? Will there be any Night's Watch? Another group of them have been sent up to Hardhome. They're almost certainly not going to be coming back. It's not looking good. So is this the way the wall is just going to start crumbling? Do we actually not need to have a particular way for the others to come through? Maybe the apostasy of the Night's Watch will be enough. It's a really interesting theory. It's one I don't think people have. Maybe I'll make a video out of it. It might be quite fun. But this idea that the Night's Watch have to be there in order for the magic to work is really important. Alexandra Groom saying, just wanted to say I love your videos. Oh, thank you so much. I hugely appreciate that. And Martin S saying, I think one thing is odd about Arya Stark. Eddard is a very honourable man, except maybe for Arthur Dayne's death, but his younger daughter, assassination is not a very honourable way of killing. Yes, so it's not, but one of the things which is noticeable with Arya is that she always sticks to this idea of somebody has to deserve it. Everybody that she kills, she wants them to deserve it. Now, when she's in Harrenhal and she's ordering the deaths of people, it's because they deserve it, because they've been nasty, because they've done cruel things. When she gets over to Braavos, the kindly man is telling the story of the foundation of the Faceless Men and says that first of all they killed one of the slaves who cried out for death, and Arya said, why the slaves? Surely you should be killing the slave masters, because they're the bad guys in this. And she basically gets told straight away, no, that's not what this is about. It's not about who deserves to die. She then, when she's there, in Braavos, she kills Darion, who's a member of the Night's Watch, ironically, given what we've just been saying, who's abandoned his post. So what... That's another way that the Night's Watch, 3 more members of the Night's Watch, we get Darion, we get Sam, Maester Aemon, all they headed down south, even more members of the Night's Watch just slowly leaking away. But she kills him because he abandoned his post. She thinks that there's a reason for him to die. The people on her kill list are there because she thinks that they deserve to die. So assassination may not be honourable, but in her mind it is. In her mind, she's doing the same kind of thing that Lady Stoneheart is doing. It's getting revenge against those who have wronged House Stark. Let's go to Shelley J saying, my question is about Illyrio and his motives. This is Illyrio Mapatis, if we can safely assume that he'd been playing the long game with Varys, Jon Con, and the others to bring Aegon VI to the throne, what was his goal in helping Viserys and Dany when we first meet him in the Game of Thrones? I'm rereading now, and it seems like maybe he was trying to appease Khal Drogo, since the Dothraki were raiding in the area and or trying to get Viserys and Dany out of the way to make Aegon VI the only Targaryen remaining. Okay. So, what is Illyrio's plan? Well, he has lots of plans. This is the thing of the Golden Company even note this and mock it, is that he seems to have a new plan every week, Illyrio. Yes, he's got his long-term plan is to get Aegon VI onto the throne in Westeros. How is he going to go about doing that? Well, the original plan seems to be, and this is him and Varys, who are old buddies from youth, working together. The original plan seems to have been for Varys to be helping foment problems in Westeros, and then for Illyrio to get Viserys together with the Dothraki, to be coming in and invading Westeros, and that would reclaim the throne for the Targaryens. And then presumably somehow we get Fagon coming in afterwards, and he would actually take over. The assumption, I think, has to be here that people will realize that Viserys is rubbish, and then they would turn to Fagon instead. So this plan shifts a little bit here and there. So the plan marrying off Daenerys to Khal Drogo seems to have been to get the Khalasar, to get Khal Drogo's agreement and support to be joining in with this, to be going with Viserys westwards. Illyrio thought that Viserys would, or tried to get Viserys to stay with him in Pentos, but Viserys insisted on going with Khal Drogo and his sister. Illyrio seems to think that Daenerys will just die, disappear. She's not that important. He only starts taking an interest in her when she survives, and then she gets dragons. Then he seems to tweak his idea. Viserys is dead, but Dany's still there. Okay, well, we can still invade Westeros. How are we going to do that? Well, maybe I'll get Fagon to marry Daenerys, and then they can invade Westeros together, and he can rule, or they can joint rule. Maybe that's the way they can go. But then it's okay. I'm going to try and get the Golden Company on side. She's gone missing. We'll now head off and start the invasion without her. So the plan shifts a lot. The high level thing is, yes, I'm going to install this man onto the throne of Westeros. How he goes about doing that is always an invasion from a Targaryen-led invasion from Essos over to Westeros. What the different pieces are of that shifts quite a lot, but that's the overall idea. Question from Jay Jenkinson saying, first live show, you bring the lore to life. Great job. Well, thank you very much, and welcome. If this is your first time watching, it's great to have you. And question from Chaos Ballerina saying, why do the 5 forts exist? If it's the others, does that mean there's a land bridge connecting North Westeros and Essos, or can they cross water if it's frozen? So the 5 forts are in the northeast of Yi Ti, and the geography of that part of the world basically means you've got mountains, you've got a big, huge lake, and in between them there's this sort of gap, the far side of which is like where the wild things live. No, we don't really know what's over there, but lots of rumors of bad things. And there are 5 massive forts which guard the way, or protect the border is probably the better way of saying it. These are made from fused black stone, the likes of which we see at the base of the High Tower, incidentally. Why are they there? Well, it does seem to be protecting Yi Ti from something. The legends are that back in the first long night, or around that time, then bad things, they're not described in the same way as the others, but probably they are, came in to Yi Ti, and so this is what the 5 forts are there. So they have the same feel as being the wall. This is how we're protecting the boundaries of civilization against the others, lest they return. So that's the kind of feel of why they are there. What does this imply about the others? Not, I think, that Westeros and Essos are connected other than through the North Pole, for want of a better word, the heart of winter. And so when this happened, the first long night, the others came down through the north of Westeros, but also came down through the northeast of Essos. So that's and Essos, this wasn't, the long night was not just in Westeros. All of Essos was affected as well. This is a planet-wide thing. Let's go to a question from Colt Foster, saying Thursdays have quickly become my favorite day of the week because of your streams. Well, thank you. I'm really that means a lot. My question today is about Sir Gendry. What's his role in the story moving forward? Why would he be knighted unless he has some role to play moving forward? I assume he might know how to reforge Valyrian steel, but I don't know what else he might do. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. So we have to, I think, pick out the show Gendry from book Gendry. Show Gendry was an amalgamation of two characters, the Gendry that we know from the books and also Edric Storm. Edric Storm was Robert Baratheon's first bastard child who was recognized by him, and he grew up in Storm's End. He was the one that Melisandre got, that Melisandre did the leeching with, got the leeches, the burning of them, the killing of the three kings, or the whether that was a trick or not, probably was just a trick rather than magic. And then she wanted to sacrifice him because he had king's blood. Davos saves him, and where he goes is over to Essos. He's got a small group of protectors. They get in a boat, they head off over to Lys, is where they're heading. He's out of the picture for the time being. Gendry is the blacksmith's apprentice who goes with Arya in the Night's Watch train, ending up in Harrenhal, escapes with her. They end up in the inn at the crossroads. Arya heads off, but he basically stays. He joins up with the Brotherhood Without Banners. He is a blacksmith, which is an incredibly important trade at the time, so they loved having him around. And he gets knighted, as you say, as part of the Brotherhood Without Banners. He also has a really important part to play. He saves Brienne, spends about a book just wandering around the Riverlands, basically. He saves her life at one point. So he still has a role there. So I think if we're thinking about Gendry's role going forward, we have to distinguish that with potentially what Edric's role is. Edric's role is being the real recognized bastard son of Robert Baratheon. So if we're looking at somebody at the end of this who's going to be having that, who's going to take over Storm's End at the end of it, Edric Storm is probably a better bet. So what for Gendry? Might he be forging some Valyrian steel? He was apprenticed to Tobbo Mott, who was one of the few people who knew how to reforge Valyrian steel. He didn't know how to make it to start with, but if he had some Valyrian steel, he could reforge it into something else. He was the person who reforged Ice, Ned Stark's massive sword, into two slightly smaller swords for the house for Lannisters. So could Gendry know how to do that? There's a chance that he could. Will that come in useful? Quite possibly. But the thing is, there isn't like this huge store of weapons, Valyrian steel out there that you can forge into weapons to be used against the others. So most Valyrian steel that's out there already is in use as a weapon. He could be made used for that. My best guess, though, at the moment is he's going to stay in and around the inn at the crossroads in the center of Westeros, and so many things are going on that in the Riverlands that he will interact with, and it's almost impossible to know in the Riverlands because it depends on what order different people come across other people there. We've got Jaime, we've got Lady Stoneheart, we've got the Blackfish, we've got the Blackfish's garrison, we've got the Brave Companions going up, we've got Arya's super pack, we've got so many of these different groups that are just moving around. I do wonder, at a slightly higher level though, whether at this point he does not know, he still does not know that he's Robert Baratheon's bastard son. I do wonder whether George R. R. Martin will use him as being this person. Should he be told? actually, is he better off not knowing? Is it safer for him not to know this? Would it help him in any way, shape, or form if he knew it? And it would not surprise me if he gets to the end of this and still does not know who he is, because people have made an active decision not to tell him because they think that he doesn't need to know. It doesn't actually help him. His life is better without knowing. Martin S. questions saying, from the show, I get the impression that J.R. Mormont is a good and honourable man and a good commander. Is he more moral than his son Jorah? I mean, I think the short answer is yes, but it's not. I mean, I don't think George R. R. Martin believes in a sort of a ranking of morality. J.R. was a flawed man. Let's put it that way. When he took over as the head of House Mormont from his father, then he was in love with a woman who wanted things, a style of living that he could not possibly provide on Bear Island, because Bear Island is an incredibly beautiful place, but doesn't have much money. And she wanted entertainment. She wanted the finest clothes. She wanted lots of things, and he was bankrupting the family out of love for this woman, who and eventually the way that he found to find time to find the money was slavery. He descended that far down, Jorah Mormont, and he got discovered, and Ned Stark was going to dispense justice and was on his way to dispense justice, and basically Jorah left, at which point his wife then left him, and that's why he was over in Seven Kingdoms. He then accepted a bit of money to be betraying Daenerys. So if you look at all of that, you have to say he's not a particularly morally upright person. He seems to be learning the lesson, the error of his ways. He seems to be trying to be a better person. And there is, with him, maybe it was just guilt, we don't know, but he left Longclaw, the ancestral Valyrian steel sword, because he thought, actually, he doesn't deserve it. He's dishonored this, so he leaves it for his family. He leaves it for his father when he heads off to Essos, which actually is a huge thing, because if he had really descended down to the bottom, he would have taken a Valyrian steel sword. You could sell it and set yourself up for life, but he decided not to. So J.R. Mormont comes across as being gruff but fair, quite an honourable man, and also quite insightful. He is the person who really goes, we now need to figure out what on earth's going on north of the wall. This is just not normal. He really wants to persuade people of the reality of the fact that there are White Walkers and Whites, and he does quite a few canny moves while he's there that we see just in that first book. He is a good character, and I like him a lot. And it's noticeable that Tyrion, when he's at the wall early on in the book, and he's mocking this idea that there might be, anything bad north of the wall. The two people who he seems to actually pay attention to, Maester Aemon, of course, and also J.R. Mormont. He's impressed, and it's like, okay, this is somebody I should pay attention to. But that's a slight digression. Is J.R. Mormont a more noble person than his son? I think the simple answer is yes. Ranabir Mitra saying, does the existence of the fused black stone sea stone chair in Pike suggest that the Ironborn hail from the great empire of the Dawn? GGMU, back to you. not very glory day today, but anyway, the Blackstone. I did a video on this a while ago because there are 4 different types of Blackstone, and I think we often confuse them within this world. The first is just natural cobalt of a kind, which is found, and particularly a lot in Westeros. There are some castles built from it, and when it rains, then it can get a kind of a slick appearance. But this is not the same as fused Blackstone or the oily Blackstone. Now, the fused Blackstone, we seem to have broadly two types, although my best guess is that this is just they got better at it over time. You get the fused Blackstone that we have in the 5 forts and also in the base of the high tower. This seems to be from millennia ago. There's no twiddly carving on it. It's just massive, big fused Blackstone blocks carved out, used as some kind of defensive structure. Then we get the next kind of fused Blackstone, which is what the Valyrians used to use. They would create the Valyrian roads. They created the wall around Volantis. And later on, also a lot of the work on Dragonstone. This is they would use dragon fire and magic to be molding stone. So that seems to be the next sort of level we've got going on there. Then we get oily Blackstone. And we hear of oily Blackstone in only 4 places. One is the Seastone Chair. Another one is a Shy. Another one is on the Isle of Toads. And then the 4th one, I think, is in Sartorius, but the exact place eludes me at the moment. These seem to be of different substance. Now, if I, they seem to drink in light. They seem to be different to everything, all the other kind of stone around them. So I think that the question is, does this link across to the 5 forts? I think no. It might link across to a Shy. But it's one of these mysteries that he's included in there. My best guess is that, and if you want a completely random, I'm not going to follow this up, but if you go to a Shy, I think that is made from weirwood or shade of the evening trees that have died and calcified, and it's basically these are wooden structures that have turned into stone structures, and they drink in the light. Okay, let's go to a question from Ty Farnsworth saying, "Hey Robert, at the end of the Game of Thrones show, we see every kingdom represented by an explicit ruler, save for an unnamed Prince of Dawn. By the end of this book series, do you think George will leave the fates of the kingdoms open to interpretation, or will we see explicit governance by the new regime? If the latter, who do you think will lead each kingdom?" Well, petrified weirwood, people are saying, yeah, absolutely, not calcified, petrified. I think he will leave a lot more to the imagination than we probably want. I think the story ends, there might be a little bit of wrapping it up at the end, but the story does not end with a detailed breakdown of what the government, as much as I would want it, what the governance structure of the 7 kingdoms is going to be going forward. It's when we've dealt with the main plot and we get resolutions for the main characters. So what will happen? Will we learn who's going to be ruling each of the 7 kingdoms if the 7 kingdoms survive? Well, I think what happened on the TV show is probably not far off on some of them. I think there's a fairly good chance that Sansa ends up in the north, simply by process of elimination. I think Rickon's going to be dead. I think Rob's already dead. I think Jon's not going to want it. Arya's definitely not going to want it, which leaves her and Bran. And if Bran is king of the Seven Kingdoms, she's the only Stark left standing. So I think she is definitely going to end up there. Edmure may well survive, in which case he would end up in the Riverlands. I think Tyrion will survive, in which case I think he's going to be the only Lannister standing, pretty much, apart from a few random cousins. So I think he inherits Casterly Rock. The rest are slightly less easy to predict. Asher inheriting the Iron Islands seems reasonably sensible. Arianne is a reasonable guess for Dawn. But yeah, Robin Arryn you would have hoped would inherit. I'd like him to inherit the Vale of Arryn, but one wonders whether Littlefinger might try and kill him before then. Which I've probably forgotten one. Oh yeah, so down in the Reach, the Tyrells. I do. Some of the Tyrells will survive, I'm sure. Willis Tyrell is still around. He's been sort of off camera pretty much the entire story, but he seems like a good enough guy. So why not him? I think there's a fair chance we'll learn about quite a few of these, but we just won't see it all in action. Amy Smith saying, I've been taking the opportunity to catch up on old live streams while you re-uploaded to this channel. Just to thank you for your time and effort in creating amazing videos every week. Love to you and the mods. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I will, just so you know, in terms of this channel, I'm planning on moving over some of the other sort of live streamy kind of things over the course of the next couple of weeks. So you may see quite a few of the other videos that I recorded on the main channel migrate over to here over the next couple of weeks. Then we'll start getting a lot more new content. But the live streams every Thursday, the live streams here, and we'll be getting short form content as well. AK Channel TV, hi there, saying favorite musical track for Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. I tried reading the books with some of the music playing, and it really enhances the experience. Oh, yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine that it would. My favorite. I always forget the name of the piece, but it's the bit when we get the build up to Cersei blowing up the Great Sept. I thought that was a beautiful piece of music when it just sort of slowly drew you in and built up towards the sort of the climax. So I thought that was fantastic. So that's probably my favorite. House of the Dragon. As for the music, I don't know what anyone else felt. I was a little disappointed they kept with the Game of Thrones theme. I understand why. But I think I would have preferred a new theme. And I thought that the music itself was good. Again, it's the same composer, but I don't think it reached any new heights in House of the Dragon Season 1, which is fine. I don't think Game of Thrones Season 1, other than the obviously excellent theme tune, did. So maybe we'll work our way into that. Lady Pushkin saying, did you nearly do a northern accent? And if so, I want to hear it again. No, you would never hear me attempt a northern accent. Certainly not live on camera anyway. The Ty Farnsworth, now I've done that one. Mara Lee saying, Bloodraven is one of my favourite book characters, and I was thrilled that we will be getting a new spin-off based on Duncan Egg. Does this mean we might get to see Bloodraven eventually on the show, or do you think we'll have to wait until someone does a show about the Blackfire Rebellion? Yes, we should see, if not in season 1, but certainly if they cover book one story per season. Season 3, when we get to the Mystery Night, Bloodraven will appear, which will be absolutely fantastic. I will be beside myself with joy. So assuming we get there, he is an ever present in the world of Duncan Egg all through this. It's even if he's not there, we should be hearing about him. Yes, we shouldn't have to wait for something about the Blackfire Rebellions. Alan Simpson, this is about House of the Dragon. How do you think Aegon's prophecy managed to get passed down through the turmoil of Aegon the Uncrowned and Maegor? Neither ever considered Jaehaerys their heir in their lifetimes. Well, I think it could have come down in a few different ways. It's a good question, which is why I paused for a moment. The thing is that I'm pretty sure that Aegon didn't just keep this to himself. I'm sure he told his sister wives, which means that Visenya will have known about it. Visenya will have passed this on to Maegor, and then Maegor, although he wouldn't have passed it on to Jaehaerys, could have passed this on to Arya. So that's one route down. But then we get the other route down where we rely not on Aerys himself telling just one person, but maybe that got shared a bit more widely. Aerys is an interesting character because he's not he's weak in a way that some might go, I will hold on to this and not be telling anyone else. He always seemed to be wanting to win people's approval, and so it would make sense if he told more than one of his children. And the moment he might have told more than one of his children, you can easily see how this gets onto Jaehaerys. So there's a number of different routes that this could have come down, and I don't see this as a big issue. It's the fact it got to Jaehaerys is the main thing, and we know it got to Jaehaerys. It's just a matter of figuring out how it did. My best guess is probably more like Aerys than down through Maegor. Mara Lee saying, besides the dance, Aegon's conquest, and the Blackfire Rebellion, what other stories could future showrunners tell that fans would like to see played out on TV? I would like to see some of the stories about the North and the kings in the North. Would love to see the Night's King, the 13th Lord Commander. That would make a very interesting story on TV. Yeah, I agree. I'd love to see some stuff in the North. I think the long night, the first long night, is not, other than in case they do like a Legends of the Long Night kind of like animated shorts or something like that. I can't see that they will do that. This is what they were doing. If you remember, and they had that pilot, very expensive pilot, $35 million that they tried. That Blood Moon, I think they called it. That was going to be covering all of that, and they came to the conclusion, among other things, we haven't seen it, we don't know, maybe it was really bad, who knows, that they came to the conclusion that this was not, they didn't have enough from George R. R. Martin on this to go ahead with it. It is no coincidence that the two things that we've got spin-offs for House of the Dragon and Dunk and Egg, we have got written things, finished things from George R. R. Martin that they can adapt. So they made a clear strategic move away from stuff that they don't have much about and towards stuff that they do have things about. The projects that have not been greenlit but have been in limbo for seemingly years, definitely years now, at least 3 years for some of these things, like the 9 Voyages of Corlys Velaryon, they would be moving. They would have to expand. We get a couple of pages on the 9 Voyages of Corlys Velaryon. They would have to expand hugely. This is completely new material. So they seem very twitchy about this. They seem very uncertain about this. So given all of that, the most logical place for them to go, whether they would do it, is Robert's Rebellion. And I think people would love it. I would personally love it. Tony at Harrenhal always fascinates me. We heard a while ago about there being possibly a stage play about this, but we've heard nothing for a while. So maybe that's not happening anymore. I would be very disappointed if that's the case. But I think Robert's Rebellion is the next most obvious one. Kelly Summers, tinfoil. Arya told Bath and the Maesters the prophecy. Yeah, possibly. I mean, Septon Bath, I feel sure that Jaehaerys could have told Septon Bath, definitely. whether Bath could have told him. That's a different matter indeed. Pardon me. Sorry, it's getting a little late here. AK Channel TV saying, "Do you think that the blood and cheese scene will be a linear sequence like blowing up the sept? Also, I'd love to see Helena and Rhaenyra have a scene. Yeah, I'd love to see Rhaenyra and Helena have a scene. Will it be a linear sequence like blowing up the sept? I don't know. This will be one of the first couple of episodes of season 2. I'm absolutely sure. They will want to open with a bang with season 2, and this is going to be about revenge for the death of Lucerys. So I could see this happening in the same kind of way that the Red Wedding they did. So at the end of an episode, we get, and I think that they could build this up with Helena playing quite a central role. With her kind of prophetic thing, she's starting to get agitated. She's saying things that nobody understands. We get this tying in with the opening scene maybe of Rhaenyra and Daemon plotting revenge, and Daemon saying, "I know someone who might be able to help," and then we have a whole issue of what's going on with the White Worm, with the spy war, which is going to be happening, and I can see over the course of an hour building up and building up and building up. We know something big's going to happen. Somebody's going to get revenge on someone somehow, and then we get blood and cheese at the end. And they could cut it almost the same way they did with the Red Wedding. The bad thing happens, the screen goes black, and so we're waiting for next episode to find out what next. Kelly Summers saying, "Hi Robert, what's your weirdest off-the-cuff idea that has no evidence but still has little counter-evidence and has some reasoning? Mine would be that Varys, Master of Disguise and Secrets, is not a eunuch at all, but a woman, Illyrio's wife and Phaegon's mother. The only confirmation I can think of is that Varys is a eunuch, is his stories, and Ros in the show. I highly doubt it's true, but I don't know why it couldn't be, aside from being an unnecessary digression to reveal." Yeah, so great. You're always good with the tinfoil theories. I thought about this a bit, and I think I've got some headcanon that I don't think it's ever going to be spelt out like this. And I don't think that there's any particular evidence for this, but it just makes absolute sense for me, which is in Dunk and Egg, which is that Dunk is, and I don't even know how to explain it, but Dunk is a sort of a non-magical node or catalyst, by which I mean he is so non-magical that wherever he goes, magical things are happening around him, and fate is happening around him. As he moves through his life, he is just setting off chains of events that have ramifications that he does not understand and nobody else can foresee. Which is why when he was young, Bloodraven is riding through the city and suddenly just turns and looks at him. It's Dunk remembers it. Quite an unnerving sort of memory that Bloodraven just turns and stares at him. And the general plain text reading is clearly this is because Bloodraven's magical and he can see a bit of Dunk's future, can sense that he's important. But what if he is just this kind of walking catalyst that is so non-magical he's magical, by which I mean when he first enters our story, the heir to the throne dies. Where he goes saves Egg's life. We see that He is just there blundering into the plotting for the second Blackfire Rebellion, and Bloodraven's like, why are you here? How on earth could you just randomly be here? And that feeling, I think, will keep going through this. They're going to go up to Winterfell next. What happens in Winterfell? Well, who knows? But perhaps the time, we do know that there's a little bit of a succession crisis in the Stark family, because lots of Starks have recently died, and it's a matter of who's going to be. And perhaps Dunk just sort of bumbles his way in, and the future course of the Stark dynasty is impacted by his very presence. We know at the very end of the story that he saves lives at the tourney at Harrenhal. Perhaps he will even save the life of baby Rhaegar, who is born there. Perhaps we will look back and go, you know what, Dunk stumbling through his own life story has impacted every aspect of A Song of Ice and Fire. And what we're seeing here is not just George R. R. Martin writing a series of fun little stories with a couple of engaging characters, but actually this is the origin story for A Song of Ice and Fire. This is what sets it all off. As I say, clearly is just a set of fun stories, and clearly Dunk is an important person. But if I had one unsustainable by fact thought, it's that he is a sort of a non-magical magical catalyst for events. I'm just looking in the chat now. Andrew K saying Dunk is definitely an impact maker, knowingly or unknowingly. Bit of a Heracles vibe, charging into things. Eldrick Stoneskin saying, I agree. It's almost like because of his childlike naivete. Terra Incognito saying Bloodraven can see the impact Dunk has on the timeline, feel the ripples, etc. Agreed Weirwood saying, does he bring Old Nan to Winterfell to be a wet nurse? That would yeah, absolutely. When the hints we've got in the text are that, you know, maybe certainly there's some kissing going on there, maybe even a little bit more. Maybe she can be a wet nurse because of what happened between her and Dunk. So yeah, it's I've got a lot more support for this than perhaps I was thinking. So yeah, there's definitely something going on there with Dunk, and I haven't quite put my finger on it yet exactly. Maralise asking if there's any update on books from George R. R. Martin soon to be released. We had last had an update when he did his blog post after the announcement of Dunk and Egg, the TV show, and basically he said yes, he's still doing The Winds of Winter. Who knows when that will come out? I'm not going to speculate here now. We've gone over that many times. But he says after that, he will want to do a Dunk and Egg story. After that, he will want to do either A Dream of Spring or Fire and Blood Part 2. After that, he will want to do another Dunk and Egg story because he's insistent he wants to stay ahead of the TV show this time. Then he'll do the other one of Fire and Blood, then presumably back to more Dunk and Egg. So that's the order that we've got now. He changes his mind on this quite regularly. So the only thing that he's not changed his mind on, to be fair to him, is that he is focusing on The Winds of Winter. Ranabir Mitra saying, I agree with Joe Magician when he proposed that Dunk saved a pregnant Rhaella from being sacrificed by Aegon V during Summerhall. Yep, quite possibly. Shelley J saying, like his shield heraldry, Dunk is a tall tree with his roots and branches reaching in all directions. Yeah, interesting. I like that a lot. Callie Summers saying, having done deep dives on the earlier Targaryen houses, or the early Targaryen house, who do you think actually left the greatest legacy, good and bad? Jaehaerys the First, Aegon the First, Maegor, Aerys the Second, Viserys the First, or Second? I mean, I think in terms of legacy, obviously you have Aegon the First, who, but for him, I mean, who knows? The Targaryens wouldn't have maybe invaded for another generation or two. But the other colossus here is Jaehaerys, because you can come in and take over a continent, but to actually turn it into effectively a functioning country. That was what Jaehaerys did with Septon Bath, by doing the boring stuff, by writing the Book of Laws, by building roads connecting the major cities, by providing sanitation for the capital city, that kind of thing. Those were the things that Jaehaerys did. They had a huge knock-on effect. Aerys, Maegor, they burnt brightly. Well, Maegor burnt brightly. Aerys didn't so much, but they didn't actually have a long-term impact, either of them. If Jaehaerys had come straight after Aegon I, probably would have ended up in roughly the same place. Then we get Viserys. Viserys the first. Obviously his actions partly led to the Targaryen Civil War, the Dance of the Dragons, but he was mostly ruling over the results of Jaehaerys' good rule. So the Targaryen rule reached its height, zenith, under Viserys I, we're told, but it wouldn't have done if Jaehaerys hadn't done the hard work beforehand. Okay, I've got one more question from one of my patrons, which is it's not a Song of Ice and Fire question. Now is the right time to drop. If you've got any more questions, now is the good time to drop them into the chat. George R. R. Tolkien said, I also wanted to ask if you got a chance to check out the trailer for Dune Part 2. It's looking like this one might blow the first one out of the water, and I thought the first one was almost perfect in every way. Yeah, I really enjoyed Dune Part 1, and the Dune Part 2 trailer came out yesterday. I will tweet it out after this. I'll tweet it out in case you missed it. I did really like the trailer. I thought it was very good, very moody, in the same way that Part 1 was a very moody film. My uncertainty, and I don't know if this is even the right word, the second half of Dune as a novel is it feels different to the first half. The second half, we're a lot more inside Paul's head. He goes through, with no spoilers, but he sort of goes through an awakening of sorts. And so a huge amount of the character development and the plot development happens inside his thoughts. Things happen, yes, we get the action and events, but if we're trying to understand where this all goes, where the plot line goes, and why, it's about what's happening inside his head. So I would be fascinated to see how they do that for the second film. Dune, for those who haven't sort of either read the main book or the further books, the further into the story you get, the more mind-bending is probably the best way, trippy the whole thing gets. So and some say weird. It's clearly a work of genius, but it's a very troubled genius, and it gets more troubled the further into it you go, it has to be said. But just looking at the trailer, yes, I thought it was fantastic. In sort of half answering the question that people always ask me about Dune, yeah, I love Dune. I think Dune's great. Will I cover it on here? I haven't decided. It depends how much spare time and energy I have when that comes out. Right, let's go have a quick flick through the chat. Terry Incognita saying, framing device of Nan telling stories to young Starkling, different story from the Dawn Age or Age of Heroes each week. I think that would work. And as I say, like an anime version of that, I think would work fantastically well. Carl Karsnark saying, Dunk and Nan sitting in a weirwood tree, Kissing. Yeah, that's definitely the feeling we have from that. think that's Kate Whitehorse. Congratulations. Welcome to the new channel. We're very near the end, so apologies if you came in right towards the end, but welcome to you. Karis Ballerina asking if there's no membership option. I will sort that out. I didn't want to until I knew what I was doing with these channels. I didn't want to do that. But yeah, I will put the membership option up on here if anyone wants to go with that. Andrew K saying one of the underrated aspects of Dunk and Egg, there's so many super iconic characters on offer in those novellas, even in passing. Eldrick Stoneskin saying, I heard they were making a magician show based on the Raymond D. Feist books. Excited? Yes, I'm excited. This is I had not heard that. I'm going to go and hunt for that after this. So yeah, Raymond D. Feist, I love. For those who do not know, Magician, the Rift War saga, which starts with the book Magician, has, I don't know, 35 books in it, something like that. This is one of those things that is, I mean, I would call it a guilty pleasure of mine, but I don't really feel guilty about it. It's just good fun fantasy stories written in an engaging and fast-paced way with great characters. And I am at the moment I'm currently going through fulfilling a promise I made to myself as a younger man, which was there were 35, as I say, I think something like 35 books in this series once you get all of the like offshoots and things like that. I got most of the way through before I stopped it, and I said to myself, once he'd finished and got to the end of this saga, I would go back and read them all from beginning to end. And I am now living up to that promise I made to myself many years ago, and I'm listening my way through, as I do a lot of my reading now is through listening, and I'm listening my way through. So for those who know the series, I've just started on Daughter of the Empire, which is one of my favorite of those stories. So yes, I did not know about that, and yes, I'm very excited. Let's go, just have a quick check through. I think that's me caught up on the chat. So thank you so much, and everyone, for congratulations and welcome. Congratulations on finding the new channel, and welcome to it. As of now, all live streams will be on this channel. We will be back next week. I may do a Clash of Kings. I finished re-listening to Clash of Kings recently, and I may do a Clash of Kings one, or maybe we'll go back looking at one of the Targaryen rulers. I haven't decided yet, so keep an eye out for that. If you haven't subscribed and clicked the little bell icon to make sure you get the notifications, please do, for this channel, so you get notifications when the live streams are coming up, and also the new content, which is going to be coming on stream soon. But if you, a few thank yous. Patrons, thank you. Moderators, thank you. You are amazing. If you're watching this back a little bit later, there will be appearing somewhere around here a link to some other live streams I've done, a link appearing somewhere around here to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support in Deep Geek if you wish to do so. That is all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.